You probably wouldn't believe me if I told you that for the past 15 years, I've been living with a secret bigger than my own dreams. That secret isn't a forgotten romance, nor is it a small mistake that people can easily overlook. It's a multi-billion-dollar empire. An empire I built from digital art and technology that the world once dismissed as meaningless games. Every morning, I look out the window of my penthouse, skyscrapers reflecting the sunlight, while I still pretend to live a life like everyone else. A poor, anonymous life, just like what my family always expected from me. Do you know what that feels like? The feeling of having to hide a massive truth about yourself every single day, because if it ever comes out, the world as you know it might never be the same. My name is Zoe. I am the founder and CEO of an NFT empire worth over $2 billion. A number that might sound like a fantasy to you. But if you saw the days when I was living in a tiny apartment, scraping together rent money, you wouldn't believe it was me. My entire family, even my friends, all thought I was just a dreamer. A young girl with a head full of ideas but no real talent. They never understood that I started from nothing. From digital images that only a small niche of people cared about at the time. I didn't just ignore all the doubt my family had. I used it as fuel to build something they never could have imagined. The truth is, at this point, I've created a massive empire with millions of followers worldwide and multi-million-dollar deals. But I can't let my family know about it. Never. They would never understand, never accept, that I could be successful without following the path they laid out for me. And for the past 15 years, I've done everything I could to make sure they still think I'm the old Zoe, the broke girl with nothing but a pile of sketches and misguided ideas. I'd lived in that secret, worked non-stop, and built an empire known only to me and a few close companions. There were only a few times I let them catch a glimpse of my success, but even then they dismissed it as luck. A fluke. I'd quickly grow out of. And today, everything is going to change. Not because I want to show off, but because I can't hide it anymore. An article is about to be published. About me. About the NFT empire I built. And no one in my family knows. They won't understand that I did it all on my own. My story, a story they never saw coming, is going public. And they'll be forced to face the truth I've hidden all these years. But are they ready for it? You probably can't imagine what it felt like to read the first few lines of that article. Everything inside me froze, then spun with every word, every figure I never imagined would be exposed. First, the headline. Zoe Sullivan, founder of a $3.8 billion NFT empire. That number wasn't a fantasy, wasn't a dream. It was real. A truth I had buried for 15 years. The Forbes article lit up my phone screen, bright and gleaming like a wound waiting to bleed. In that moment, I couldn't breathe. That feeling, when you watch all your secrets, all your efforts to build a different image, suddenly stripped bare before your eyes. Looking back, I remember all the times I pretended to live as a poor, even struggling woman, just to keep my success hidden from my family. The dinners with them in an old apartment I deliberately chose, driving an old car to keep up the act. It was all part of a perfect performance. But now, everything has changed. Nothing will be a secret anymore. As soon as the article went live, my phone started ringing non-stop. First was Marcus, my brother. Just hearing his name made my chest tighten, because he's the logical one, always following the path my parents set. He's the perfect child, with a stable job and easy approval from our family. But today he called me with a voice full of barely contained rage. Zoe, what the hell is this? Marcus snapped the moment I answered, skipping any greeting. What the hell is this empire? Why am I finding out from a Forbes article? I just gave a soft laugh. Don't worry, Marcus, I was just doing my job. Cut the act. Zoe, why the hell would you hide this from the whole family? How could you stay silent for this long? Mom and Dad, they were worried about you. Worried? I cut him off, my voice colder than ever. Worried that I wasn't chasing their dreams for me? Worried because I didn't do what they wanted? Maybe I was too angry, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. For years, I had lived under the weight of my family's expectations, always feeling like the disappointment, the one who couldn't keep up. They told me I'd never amount to anything, told me to stop dreaming and just be normal. And now, they were finally finding out how wrong they'd been. Marcus went quiet for a few seconds. Zoe, you really made that much money? I smiled, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. About $3,800,000,000. But that's just an estimate. The real number's even higher. I heard Marcus gasp, like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. He had lived his entire life on a safe, predictable path, never doing anything without a safety net. And now, everything he believed was realistic had just been shattered by one sentence. Then why didn't you tell us? Why hide it? Mom is going to be so shocked when she finds out about this. Marcus, I didn't hide anything. I just didn't want to hear the criticism. Didn't want to be seen as a failure and then get lectured about the family values. I just wanted to do what I love without needing anyone's approval. I put the phone down and looked at the screen. The next message came from Olivia, my sister. She's the one who always brags about her sky-high salary, her stable job, and the luxurious life she built. And now, even she couldn't contain her curiosity. Zoe, hey. Is this real? When were you planning to tell the family? We really had no idea what you were doing. I calmly replied, yes, Olivia, it's time you all knew the truth. As soon as I hit send, my mom called. This time, I couldn't ignore it. She had always told me that success is meant to be shared, yet she was also the one who advised me to give up art and find a real job. I answered with a quiet breath. Zoe, what have you done? The Forbes article? We need to talk to you. I'll see you and Dad at the family meeting, I said, the surprise in her voice confirming that everything was about to change for good. I looked out the window, feeling like everything was moving fast. This wasn't just the beginning of change in my family. It was a turning point in the journey I had started long ago. No one could look down on me anymore. No one could call me a failure. And I knew when I saw my family again, they would see the poor little sister. They would see Zoe Sullivan, the woman who built a massive empire they never even imagined. I didn't have to live in hiding anymore. My phone rang again. This time, it was Marcus. His voice came through the line the moment I picked up, without delay or the usual politeness. I could feel the tension from the other side. Zoe, what the hell is going on? Marcus started with a question that was clearly not a greeting. He never called me without a serious reason, but today was different, and I knew right away that this wasn't normal. I took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. Hi, Marcus. What's going on? What's going on? He shouted, no longer able to contain his frustration. What is this? How could you hide this empire from the family? We're family, Zoe. Why would you do this? I couldn't help but feel a small, quiet satisfaction inside. For 15 years, I had kept this success hidden, and in this moment, Marcus, the one whose criticism, advice, and judgment I'd endured since I was little, finally had to face the truth. I didn't hide anything, I replied, my voice calm, though I felt stronger than ever inside. I just didn't think it was necessary to tell you or the family what I was doing. I didn't want everyone thinking I was doing something weird or wrong. And I didn't want more criticism. There was a brief silence between us. I could hear Marcus breathing on the other end, like he couldn't believe what had just happened. And I understood that feeling, because I had lived with it for the past 15 years. How much did you actually make from this? Marcus asked, his voice now sounding so shocked he could barely keep it together. I looked down at the phone in my hand and gave a soft smile, feeling something indescribable inside. I had something he never thought I could have. And now I could finally show him the truth I'd hidden for so long? About $3,800,000,000, Marcus, I said, trying to make my answer sound casual even though I felt deeply fulfilled. And that's just a low estimate. The real number is even higher. Immediately I heard Marcus gasp. What? he said, like he couldn't believe his ears. $3,800,000,000. You made that much money? And you didn't share it with the family? Marcus, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't share it because I didn't need anyone's approval. Mom and Dad always told me to get a real job, always pushed me toward the safe path, and they treated me like a failure for years. But I did this because I believed in myself, not because of anyone else. I could sense the anger, the hurt in Marcus's voice. He was someone who followed the family's traditional path. He never dared to step outside the box our parents had created for him, and now I, Zoe, the so-called outsider, had achieved something he could only dream of. But why did you hide it from everyone? Mom, Dad, Olivia. We're family, how could you not tell us? Marcus asked, his voice shaking with what sounded like betrayal. I felt a wave of emotion rise inside me, but I kept it in. Don't you get it, Marcus? I had to hide this success because I didn't want to keep living under the weight of your expectations. I didn't want to be the poor little sister, the one everyone worried about all the time. But now? I've taken control of my life, and I'm proud of that. And Marcus? He had nothing to say. Silence stretched on for a few seconds. I knew he didn't want to admit it, but I also knew what he was feeling. That shock, that sense of being left behind when the truth turns out to be nothing like what he thought. He had always been the older brother, the one the whole family looked up to. And now he had to face the fact that I had done something he thought was impossible. So, what's next? Marcus asked, still sounding stunned. What are you going to do with all that money? I looked out the window, where the morning sun reflected off the tall buildings. I could feel strength in every breath, in every decision I'd made. I'm going to keep growing my empire. I'll invest in projects I believe in, develop new technologies. I'll make sure everyone knows I'm not a failure. I'm a creator, a visionary. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I don't need anyone's approval. Everything has changed now, and I, Zoe Sullivan, will never go back to the path my family laid out for me. So, when are you coming home? Marcus asked, his question sounding like a plea for me to return to the old world I had already left behind. I smiled softly. I'll come home, but this time I won't be the Zoe you used to know. This time, I'll show you who I've become. And with that, I hung up, leaving my brother with questions that had no answers, while I prepared to face the family. The ones who had always believed I was a failure. The night before the family meeting, I couldn't sleep. Images of my family kept replaying in my mind. The looks of pity, the criticism I had endured for so many years. Mom, Dad, Marcus and Olivia, they all thought I was just a dreamer. They didn't understand me, never had. In their eyes, I was just a girl who refused to follow the right path, someone living in a digital fantasy world they called a game or a passing trend. That day, when I decided to pursue digital art, my father immediately objected. I can still remember his voice, full of disappointment, when he told me, "Zoe, you can't live in that virtual world forever. You need to choose a real job, something that gives you a stable future. You can't keep chasing what people call digital art. That's just child's play." Those words hurt more than anything else. I asked myself over and over again, would my parents ever truly understand me? They wanted me to follow a path they believed was safe and stable, but I couldn't abandon my passion. I wanted to change the world, even just a little. But all they saw was a crazy girl who didn't know what reality was. I still vividly remember that dinner, sitting among people I called my family. Mom sat beside me, always giving me that look, full of concern but also full of judgment. "Zoe, you need to learn to be more realistic. Don't waste your time on those useless things," she said, her voice soft but full of pressure. Her words made me feel exiled in my own home. But I couldn't accept that reality. How could I keep living under the shadow of the expectations they placed on me? How could I live a life they wanted without following my own dreams? Then there was Marcus, the older brother I had always lived in the shadow of. He was always perfect in their eyes, always doing what they expected. "What are you doing, Zoe?" Marcus asked, his tone full of judgment. "You should be looking for a stable job, a real one. Don't waste time on things that have no future. You'll never make a living off that hobby." Every word from Marcus felt like a sharp arrow piercing me. He didn't understand, and never wanted to. He just wanted me to be like him, doing what the family thought was right, what society considered success. But I couldn't. I couldn't live a fake life like that. That was when I made a decision. I wouldn't let my family control my life anymore. I would carve my own path, no matter what they thought of me. And I did it. I sold my digital artworks, the very ones they called meaningless. With every piece I sold, I felt like I was taking one more step toward freedom. But even so, I couldn't share that joy with them, because I knew they would never understand. I lived in the shadow of silence, pretending to be a failure in my family's eyes. Every time I visited home, I made sure to wear something plain, drive my old car, live in a small apartment I had chosen on purpose. It was all an act. I couldn't let them see the truth, that I had already succeeded. They wouldn't be able to handle it. And now, with the Forbes article out, I no longer had to hide. Everything I had built was suddenly exposed, for the world to see. As I read the words on my phone screen, everything suddenly felt clearer than ever. I wasn't a failure. I had built an empire my family never even imagined. Right after I finished reading the article, my phone rang. It was Marcus. His voice cracked, disbelief clear in his tone. "Zoe, what did you do? Why didn't you tell us?" I sighed, feeling tired. "You didn't need to know, Marcus. I don't need your approval or anyone else's. I did this for myself, not for them." "But we're family." Marcus couldn't accept it. "How could you hide the fact that you made billions of dollars and not say a single word?" I scoffed. "Don't you get it, Marcus? I didn't hide it. I just didn't want to live under the shadow of this family anymore. I don't need them judging every move I make." Then my mom called. She had always loved me, but also always insisted I live by what she thought was right. She never saw my art as a real career. "Zoe, you have to understand that art isn't a stable job, it's just a game. You need a real career, stop dreaming." Those words, once again, felt like knives in my heart. But now, I don't have to listen to that criticism anymore. I've achieved things they will never have, and I won't allow anyone, not even my family, to devalue what I've done. Now, I'll face them, not as the failed daughter, but as Zoe Sullivan, the woman who built an empire even her own family has to bow down to. For all these years, I lived in the shadows, under the mask of poverty, a struggling artist, always barely making ends meet. But no one in my family knew I had millions in my bank account. I've asked myself so many times, would I ever truly be free, ever truly live as the person I've become? Or would I always have to pretend to be a failure in their eyes? When I first started in digital art, everyone thought it was a joke. My mom, my dad, Marcus, and Olivia all insisted I was being ridiculous, that it was just a trend, that I was wasting time on nonsense. They looked at me like I was an immature child who didn't understand the real world. And they kept saying, "Go ahead, but don't forget you still need a real job. You can't live in this illusion forever." Those words were deeply ingrained in me. Even though I had made huge strides, had sold my work for millions of dollars, I still chose to keep everything hidden. No one would ever understand. Never. They would only see digital paintings and think I was just drawing for fun, that it had no real value. So I kept living in a small apartment, driving the old car I bought back in college, wearing simple clothes I knew they'd never pay attention to. Every time I went home to visit my family, I had to pretend I had nothing. I knew that if they ever found out I was successful, they wouldn't know what to do with me. Everything would change, and I wasn't ready to face their judgment. I didn't want to hear things like, "You still don't get that art isn't a real career, Zoe." Those words would feel like a slap in the face, a slap to everything I had built. I told myself I wouldn't let them see this truth, even if it meant living a fake life. I started pretending to be poor, living in a tiny apartment, eating simple meals, wearing clothes that didn't stand out. They would never know I had built a multi-million-dollar empire, that I had created an NFT empire no one ever expected. My mom still called me often, worrying about my life, asking if I had enough money. "Zoe, you need to be careful with money. Don't forget that art isn't a long-term way to make a living, you need a stable job." I always had to hear things like that, and I always replied, "I'm fine, Mom, really," even though deep down, I knew I was far richer than they could ever imagine. I couldn't say it. I didn't want to face the pain or have to prove I was right. I kept up the act, even though I could easily afford a luxurious life. Lavish vacations, extravagant parties, expensive things. But no, I couldn't let them see any of it. Because if they knew, they'd never see me the same way again. I'd just be a traitor, someone who turned her back on everything they expected of me. The long days passed and I kept working tirelessly. I built a multi-million-dollar NFT empire all on my own, without anyone's help. But I couldn't tell them, they would only laugh at me, call it unrealistic. Mom would say again, "Zoe, digital art won't support you, you need a real job." And I knew I would never change their minds. They would always see me as a dreamer, someone who didn't understand the real world. There were nights I sat alone in my small apartment, staring at my computer screen, the place where I created digital artworks worth millions of dollars. I sold those pieces to art lovers all over the world, but I couldn't share that joy with anyone. It was a kind of loneliness I couldn't put into words. I lived in the shadows of my own success, afraid that if I was exposed, I'd lose everything. I remember once, at Christmas, my family held a big gathering. My mom sat next to me, worried as usual, and asked, "Are you doing okay, Zoe? Do you have enough money to get by?" I just smiled and said, "I'm fine, Mom." That was when I realized I had become an actress in my own play. A play no one could break, at least not in the eyes of my family. Day after day I kept living in the shadows, pretending to be poor, pretending I had nothing. The digital art I created, the money I earned, all of it was hidden. And I didn't regret it, because if I told my family, I'd lose everything. They would never look at me the same again. They would only see me as a traitor, someone who didn't follow the path they wanted. Even so, part of me knew that one day, the truth would have to come out. And when it did, I wouldn't have to pretend anymore. I had built an empire with my own 2 hands, and one day, the world would have to acknowledge it. But by then, I wouldn't be living under the shadow of pity or criticism anymore. There would only be me, Zoe Sullivan, the one who rose up and built an empire my family never even saw coming. My phone vibrated in my hand. I looked at the screen and saw my mom's name. A strange rush of emotion welled up in my chest. Emptiness, anxiety, but also a hint of satisfaction knowing I was about to face them. A special family meeting was coming, and I knew once it happened, nothing would ever be the same again. I slowly pressed the answer button. My mom's voice came through immediately, full of worry and firmness. "Zoe, where are you? I haven't been able to reach you for days. Your father's worried too. We need to talk." Every word she said felt like a gentle accusation, a reminder of everything I had been hiding all this time. I tried to hold myself together, to stay calm. "I've just been busy, Mom, with some things." My answer was even, but deep inside, a part of me had already started preparing for what I'd always been avoiding. Mom wasn't satisfied with that. "Zoe, you can't keep avoiding the family like this. Your father and I are always worried about you. You have to understand that. Have you ever thought about how we feel when you keep hiding like this?" She continued, still trying to get through to me. I looked at the screen again and saw a new message from Marcus. "We need to talk. Mom and Dad are really worried and you can't keep hiding anymore. We're meeting this weekend. Everything needs to be clear." It was hard to face them, but now, I couldn't turn back. I couldn't keep living a lie, even though for years I had succeeded, had gone beyond what they believed was impossible. But now, everything I had built would have to be revealed. I looked back at myself, remembered all the times they criticized my work, all the harsh words and looks of disdain I had endured. But now, they would have to see me in an entirely new light. I nodded to myself, tapped on family meeting, and confirmed a gathering at a private resort I had already arranged. Everything was ready. I had prepared all the information they needed to know about me and what I had done all these years. All the details about my NFT projects, my investments, the contracts I had signed. Everything would be clearly presented. A few days later, the day of the special family meeting arrived. I woke up early, getting ready for the tense encounter. Today, I would no longer be the Zoe they used to see, the one they always thought had failed. I had changed. I no longer had to hide anything. What worried me wasn't that they'd be angry or disappointed, it was that they would realize everything they had believed about me all these years was wrong. I had built an empire they never could have imagined. But could they accept the truth? Could they look at me differently? Or would they still see me as a failure in their eyes, even though I had proven my success? When I arrived at the resort, I could see my family's cars parked out front. They were here. I was ready to face them, but the uneasy feeling inside me wouldn't go away. Finally, I stepped into the meeting room where my family was waiting. My mom, dad, Marcus, and Olivia were all seated, their eyes fixed on me as if they were expecting an explanation. Marcus was the first to speak. "Zoe, we need to talk. The Forbes article caught us completely off guard. Can you explain to us what's been going on?" His voice didn't carry the firmness it usually did. This time it was filled with surprise, disbelief. But I could see the hurt in his eyes, like he was bracing for whatever I was about to say. My mom didn't look at me, her eyes wandered elsewhere. "Zoe, what have you done? Why did you hide everything you've been doing all these years?" She didn't say more, but I could feel the disappointment in her voice. It was the same disappointment I had endured for so long. I stood still, looked straight into my mother's eyes and spoke softly. "Mom. Dad. Everyone. I didn't hide anything from anyone. I just didn't want to face judgment, the pity in your eyes. You all thought I was a failure, just chasing unrealistic dreams. But I've done something none of you ever thought possible." I smiled slightly, feeling like these words had echoed in my mind for years, but today they no longer hurt. "Mom, Dad, everyone. I don't need the stability you always wanted for me. I've built an empire, one that none of you could have imagined. I don't need your criticism, because I've proven what I'm capable of." A heavy silence filled the room. My mom and dad, Marcus and Olivia, all stared at me with unreadable expressions. I knew they couldn't fully accept it yet, but I couldn't keep living in the shadow of their expectations. They had to see me. Zoe Sullivan, the woman who built her own empire. I turned toward the screen, where images of my projects, million-dollar contracts, and everything I had accomplished were about to be shown. There was nothing left to hide. Now was the time for them to understand what I had achieved. The day I'd been waiting for had finally arrived. My private island, a paradise I had purchased 2 years ago, was now the place where I would welcome my family. They had no idea this place existed, no clue that I had built something big enough to own my own island. Today, every secret would be revealed, and I had nothing left to hide. When the first Rolls-Royce pulled up to the dock, I could see the stunned faces of my parents and siblings. My mother, always the first to worry about me, now looked around with eyes full of disbelief, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The whole family stepped out of the car, looking around as though they had entered a world that didn't belong to them. This island was unlike anywhere they had ever been. Luxurious villas, an infinity pool with crystal-clear ocean water, modern artwork displayed throughout the space. Everything had been created by my own hands. My mother couldn't hold back. She turned to me, her eyes filled with surprise and concern. "Zoe, where are we? How?" How did you manage to have all of this? I smiled, but didn't answer right away. I had waited a long time to hear that question. My father and Marcus, the always perfect older brother in the eyes of the family, stood silently, looking around with confusion. "Let's go inside," I said, pointing toward the villa I had prepared for the meeting. Everyone followed me in, the tension in the air thick and undeniable. As we stepped inside, the light from the high-end chandelier shimmered against the walls, making the space look radiant and elegant. The gathering hadn't officially begun, but everything was in place. I could see the astonishment not only in my family's eyes, but also in their whispered voices. They couldn't understand how I could possibly own a place like this, something they'd only ever seen in Hollywood films. I invited them to sit, and once everyone had settled, I stood and looked into each familiar face. My mom, who always worried about me. My dad, who always said I'd never amount to anything. And Marcus, the model son of the family. They were the ones I had lived in the shadow of for so many years. But today, I had nothing left to hide. "This is where I live," I began, my voice steady but resolute. "This is the result of the years I've dedicated to digital art and NFTs. This is what I've built on my own, without anyone's help." My mother looked at me, her eyes filled with confusion. "Zoe, can you explain this more clearly? Is this a dream? You really earned all of this from that game you call digital art?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, Mom. This isn't a dream. This is the outcome of the artworks you always said had no value. I sold those pieces to collectors, to investors, and they paid a very high price. Every time I sold a digital painting, I was building my empire." Marcus couldn't hold back any longer. He stood up, his face filled with anger. "How much are you saying you made? An empire? All you did was draw pictures on a computer. How could that possibly lead to this?" I wasn't surprised by his reaction. He had always believed that everything had to follow a traditional path. A stable job, a degree, a real career. He never understood that art could bring value, that creativity could be a legitimate profession. "I made millions of dollars from this, Marcus. And I tried to convince Mom, Dad, and you to invest in it a long time ago, but none of you ever believed me. Mom, Dad, all of you said I could never make a living from it, and you rejected every opportunity I brought. Now, I can tell you that I built everything you turned down." I looked into my father's eyes. The man who always gave me stern advice about being realistic, about having a stable job. "Dad, I came to you about these opportunities, and you said no. But if you had invested in what I was doing, you would have had a share in a billion-dollar company, and now, I don't have to hear any more condescending words." The whole room was silent, everyone stared at me in disbelief. But I didn't stop. "I lived like a failure in your eyes. I pretended to be poor, pretended to live in a cramped apartment, drove an old car. I let you believe I had nothing, that I was just a struggling artist. But now? I've stood on my own. This is the result of what I've built. This empire is mine, not anyone else's." My mother lowered her head. Maybe for the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. My father sat there, his eyes no longer filled with doubt, but with silence instead. Marcus was still standing. His eyes were full of anger, but deep down, I knew he couldn't deny the truth. "So, what now, Zoe?" he asked, his voice a bit calmer. I smiled. "Now we sit down and talk about the opportunities you once refused. But this time, things won't be like before. I'm not the Zoe you used to see as a failure." This meeting wasn't just about sharing my success, it was my way of claiming my place in the family, showing them that I chose my own path, and that from now on, I would never again live under the control of those who didn't believe in me. The room was filled with silence when I stopped talking. My mom and dad stayed still, their eyes seeming unable to process what they had just heard. Marcus, the always exemplary older brother, didn't look as confident as he used to. What I saw in his eyes was unease, confusion. Even Olivia, my younger sister who always sought attention and validation, remained quiet. None of them could escape the truth I had hidden for so many years. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself any further. Whether they understood or not, that wasn't my concern anymore. Everything had been revealed, and now it was time for me to face myself. I didn't do this because I wanted their approval. I did it because I needed to prove my worth. Not for them, but for me. At last my mother spoke. Her voice was soft, almost frail. "Zoe? You've done things we never could have imagined. I honestly don't know what to say." I looked at her, my eyes no longer filled with anger or resentment. She was my mother, the one who gave birth to me and loved me in her own way, even if she never truly understood me. But now, she had seen her daughter. No longer a daydreamer, but a strong, independent and successful woman. "I don't need an apology, Mom," I said gently. "I just need you to understand that I chose this path, not to disappoint the family. I did it because I believed in myself. I don't want to live according to anyone else's expectations anymore." Mom didn't say anything else. She just sat there, looked up at me as if, for the first time in all these years, she truly saw her daughter. After a few seconds she smiled. A small but deeply emotional smile. "I understand now, Zoe. I'm proud of you." My father finally spoke. "Your mother's right. We can't deny this truth. You've done things we never imagined. I was wrong not to believe in you." His voice grew softer, no longer firm, but a sincere admission. "I just wanted you, my siblings, and our parents to understand one thing," I continued, my voice calm but every word carried weight. "I don't need your approval. I did this for myself. I built an empire, and proved I could succeed without following the path you chose. This is my achievement, and I'm proud of it." Marcus, the brother who always followed the family path, could no longer maintain the strong front he used to wear. He looked at me for a moment, and then sighed, his voice a little tired. "Zoe, I was wrong. I didn't think you could do it. Honestly, I couldn't imagine someone like you building something so massive. I thought you were just a kid. Just a dreamer." I looked at him, and though I felt a twinge of sadness inside, I stood firm. "I don't need your apology, Marcus. I just need you to understand that I did this without anyone's help or direction. I did it out of passion and belief in my own ability. The path I chose wasn't the one you or our parents wanted, but it was the one I needed to take." Olivia, the sister who always sought the spotlight, finally spoke. "So, what are you going to do with all of this, Zoe? Have you thought about sharing it with the family?" Her question was laced with a curiosity she couldn't hide, but also a hint of challenge. I smiled and looked into her eyes. "What am I going to do? I'm going to keep building my empire. I'll keep creating and expanding new foundations for digital art. And about sharing, that's my choice. I don't have to share anything with anyone. But, if you really want to learn and grow, I'll help those who are genuinely willing. I don't need to do this for approval or recognition from my family. What I need is respect for what I've done, and the understanding that, no matter what they think, I'm still me. Nothing has to change. They may have seen me as the failed child, but today, I've proven who I really am." In the end, my parents, Marcus, and Olivia all fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts. But I knew that, deep inside, they had at least seen a part of who I truly was. Not the Zoe they wanted, but my own Zoe. The woman who built her own empire, strong and confident. Now, I don't need to prove what I can do to anyone. Already done it. And that's all that matters. Zoe's story is a journey of rediscovering herself and affirming her worth amid family expectations and pressure. Through years of silence and hiding, she not only overcame her loved one's doubt but built a digital art empire to be proud of. Most importantly, Zoe didn't do it for recognition. She did it to prove that true success comes from confidence, passion, and perseverance, not from acceptance or approval. Thank you for following Zoe's story. What do you think about Zoe's decision to keep her success hidden, and how she faced her family? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life. I used to think that if one day everything in my life fell apart, at least I'd know why. But I was wrong. No one prepares you for the way everything can change in a single evening that seems completely normal. No one warns you that a 3-year love could collapse into a pit because of a whisper behind a kitchen door. If you've ever believed in fairy tales, I suggest you stop before it's too late. As for me, I once lived in a dream so beautiful that even I naively didn't realize it was just a dream. And then, I woke up. I met David on a fall evening in Denver, Colorado. I was 27 at the time, an interior designer who had just moved to the city after ending a 7-year relationship that went nowhere. David was from Portland, 3 years older than me, a software engineer at a rising startup. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. I arrived late, and he was the first to leave, but for a moment, between two complete strangers, our eyes met over a half-poured cocktail. He smiled first, and for some reason, my heart skipped a beat. Everything unfolded so naturally. A week later we ran into each other again, after signing up for the same morning yoga class. "Well, this must be fate," David said, his hand still sticky from a protein bar. I laughed, and for the first time in months, I felt truly alive. We started dating soon after, and within a few months we were practically inseparable. David wasn't like any man I had ever met. He wasn't just smart. He had a subtle sense of humor and a way of listening that made you feel like the most important person in the world. He didn't buy me expensive gifts, but he always remembered that I preferred lavender perfume over rose. I loved his quiet, composed demeanor, and he said I made him feel at peace. Around the following April, we decided to move in together. Our 2-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill became our little nest, where we cooked dinners together, watched movies on the old couch I couldn't bear to throw out, and talked about the future late into the night. We started talking about marriage in our 2nd year together, but we weren't in a rush. David was practical. He wanted to make sure we were ready in every way, financially, professionally, and emotionally. Then, for our 3-year anniversary, David took me to a small lakeside cabin in Estes Park. It was a cold, snowy weekend, but the scenery was breathtaking. We sat by the fireplace, sipping red wine and talking about silly childhood memories. I had no suspicion, until he reached into his coat and pulled out a small navy velvet box, his eyes holding something that made me freeze. "Julia," he said, his head slightly bowed, "I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" I didn't have time to answer with words. I just hugged him, tears streaming down my face, nodding so hard I thought my neck might snap. No background music, no fireworks, just the sound of crackling wood in the fireplace and my heart pounding like it had just been reborn. After that we started planning the wedding. We both agreed it would be a cozy ceremony, nothing too extravagant. David wasn't into luxury and I was trying to save up for our first house. We set a budget of around $25,000 for everything, from the venue and the dress to the reception. With our combined salaries it was a reasonable amount, and we could even cut costs by doing some things ourselves. We picked June of the following year for the date. Enough time to prepare, and my favorite season. I spent hours on Pinterest looking for a wedding dress that was affordable but still made me feel like a princess. David handled the invitations and picking the band. Surprisingly, he had pretty refined taste in music. Every night, after dinner, we'd sit together and write notes in a brown leather notebook, where all our dreams lived. I used to believe that if love was big enough, it could overcome anything. I used to believe David would be the one holding my hand through every storm. But what I didn't know was that some storms don't come from the outside. They begin with the people you think are your strongest allies. And I didn't know that would be the last time I truly felt safe in his arms. If there was ever a moment I should have seen a clear sign that things wouldn't go as I had hoped, it was the first call from her. 3 days after David and I announced our engagement on Facebook, Diane, David's mother, called me, not to congratulate, but to ask if I had really thought the plan through. "What do you mean?" I asked, standing in the middle of my lunch break at work, still holding half a sandwich I hadn't bitten into yet. "Oh, it's just..." The word classy dropped from her lips like a pebble, but landed straight in the pit of my stomach. I thanked her and politely declined, saying David and I already had some specific plans. But Diane paused for a beat, then switched to a voice sweet as syrup. "Well, let me take a look then. Maybe I know a few people who could help save a little on the cost." I didn't know when help turned into control. The first time we met, after the engagement, was at a small French restaurant near downtown Denver. I wore the olive dress David once said made it impossible for him to take his eyes off me. But Diane frowned the moment she saw me. "Oh, that color washes you out a bit, doesn't it?" she said, and without waiting for my response, turned to order wine as if I were invisible. During the whole meal, she went on and on about weddings she had attended, the daughter of some CEO getting married in a Napa castle, her best friend's niece hiring a famous singer for the reception. "Julia, you know," she said, "I always imagined David's wedding would have a string quartet playing softly as you walked down the aisle." I gave a soft laugh and said I wanted a simple outdoor ceremony with sunlight and wildflowers. Diane tilted her head and squinted at me, like I'd just said I wanted to hold the wedding in the backyard of a laundromat. And from that day on, the nightmare began. For the next 3 weeks, I constantly received emails from her. Restaurant links, invitation designs, lists of event planning companies she knew, price comparison charts, and even notes like, "David is allergic to cashews, so avoid Asian cuisine," even though I had clearly said we wanted an American-Italian buffet. She even sent me wedding dress photos with captions like, "This style flatters slim figures like yours." I printed everything out, laid them on the table, and took a photo to send to David with the caption, "You planning to say anything yet?" David just replied, "My mom's just a little enthusiastic. Don't worry, I'll talk to her." But he didn't say anything. And I slowly started to feel like I was planning a wedding that wasn't mine. We had picked a small, but when Diane found out, she objected immediately. "You want to have your wedding in a barn?" Her voice snapped through the phone like steel. "Good grief, David. You're the first in the family to graduate from Stanford. Your wedding should reflect that." I nearly crushed the phone in my hand. When I pushed back, David just sighed and wrapped his arm around me. "She just wants everything to be perfect. If you give in a little, it'll make things easier." I bit my lip and said nothing. When it came time to try on wedding dresses, I invited Diane along, thinking that if I took the initiative, she might ease up. I'd found an elegant lace dress, deeply discounted since it was a past-season design. When I stepped out of the fitting room, she looked up at me and went silent for exactly 3 seconds. "Not bad," she said, then turned to the sales assistant. "But do you have anything that looks classier? This fabric looks kind of cheap." My neck flushed red to the ears. I swallowed hard and turned to David. He just shrugged and avoided my eyes. I could hardly breathe as I realized I was slowly losing every part of the most important day of my life. Diane wasn't just interfering, she was stripping away every piece of the dream I had cherished. And David? He didn't protect me. Every time I brought it up, he responded with the one sentence I had come to hate to the bone. "Just go along with my mom, okay? It'll keep the peace." Keep the peace? What about me? Did anyone care how I felt? Someone who had poured time, hope, and heart into this marriage? That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m. I stared at our wedding plan, once carefully written in our brown leather notebook, now tossed carelessly on the kitchen table. Each page used to bring me joy. Now, all I felt was emptiness. And for the first time, I began to wonder, was I ever truly welcome in this family? I never thought a dinner could make me feel so small. Or more accurately, so worn down. Bit by bit, like someone was scraping away the last pieces of self-worth I had left. That evening, Diane invited us to her home in Cherry Creek for an intimate dinner with a few of her longtime friends. David said, I didn't have to go if I was tired, but he gave me that look I'd grown used to in recent months. The look of someone too afraid to stand in the middle of two sides. I nodded and agreed. Partly out of curiosity, partly out of hope. Hope that maybe, if I kept trying, things might change. I wore a simple black dress I loved, with a pair of small pearl earrings, my dad's gift on my 25th birthday. My hair was neatly pinned up, makeup soft, and I looked like the most put-together version of myself. But the moment Diane laid eyes on me as I stepped through the door, any fragile confidence I had evaporated. "Oh," she said, her eyes scanning me head to toe. "Very minimal. You definitely look practical." The words sounded harmless, but coming from her mouth they landed like a blade. The dinner started with creamy French corn soup, prepared by her private chef. I sat between David and a woman named Margot, with Diane and her old friend Veronica across the table. A woman with a face so smooth she looked freshly unwrapped from a plastic surgeon, and eyes like X-rays scanning for flaws. From the start I felt like I was being interviewed. "So, Julia," Margot leaned in, smiling faintly. "Where did you go to school again?" "David told me, but I forgot." "I went to Colorado State University," I replied with a polite smile. "I majored in interior design." "Oh," Veronica nodded, lips pressed together. "Very practical. And what about your parents? What do they do for a living?" I didn't even have a chance to answer before Diane jumped in. "Julia's father is an electrician, and her mother is a teacher's assistant at an elementary school in Aurora." No one said anything for the next few seconds. No one needed to. The silence said it all. I gave a stiff smile. "They're wonderful people. They sacrificed a lot so I could follow my passion." "Of course they did," Veronica replied, her gaze slicing through me like she was slotting me into a social tier. The next question came from Margot, like a slap out of nowhere. "So growing up, where did your family usually go for summer vacation? Aspen, Martha's Vineyard?" I laughed, thinking they were joking. "Oh, no, we usually went camping in national parks or visited my grandma in Ohio. It was fun." Silence. That dreadful silence again. Things only returned to normal when Diane raised her wine glass and switched the topic to politics, leaving me sitting there like an intruder in a world I didn't belong to. After dinner, I stayed behind to help clean up in the kitchen. David went outside to the garden with Diane's friends, and I thought it was a good opportunity to at least make a good impression with kindness. I didn't expect Diane was waiting for me. Alone. "Julia," she said as I was rinsing glasses. "You know, I'm not usually someone who speaks so directly, but I think it's time to be clear." I set the glass down and turned to face her. "I understand, David loves you. But love isn't enough. A marriage needs alignment in culture, in background, in potential and family standing." I stood still, my chest tightening. "You're a good person," she continued, her voice steady like a speech she'd rehearsed. "But you're not the kind of woman I imagined standing beside David at major events. Our friends, they won't understand that kind of simplicity." "Simplicity?" I whispered. "You're saying I'm not refined enough?" She smiled, cold, without a trace of remorse. "You're a safe choice. But David was born for more than that. You'll hold him back, Julia. And the fact that you don't see it? That's what's really frightening." My throat burned. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The rage surged to my temples, but it was buried under the shock. The brutal truth I had just heard so clearly with my entire heart. "Were you going to say something?" she asked, tilting her head. "Or are you starting to understand?" I wiped my hands and bit my lip to stop myself from crying in front of her. Then I walked out of the kitchen without saying another word. In the car I told David everything. He sat silently, staring ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel tight. "Maybe she didn't mean it that way," he said, voice softer than the hum of the car fan. "You think I imagined all of it?" I said through clenched teeth. No, it's just, she cares a lot about my future, she's just worried, that's all. I leaned back in the seat. The streetlight streaked across the window. The cold I felt didn't come from the weather. For the first time in 3 years, David felt like a stranger. And maybe he always had been. I just didn't want to see it. I used to think the worst thing was being insulted by my future mother-in-law. But it turns out, there's something far worse. When the man you love turns away and leaves you to carry all the pain alone. After that night, the night Diane looked me straight in the eyes and told me I would drag David down, I couldn't sleep peacefully anymore. I lay in the dark, with my back turned to him, counting every tick of the wall clock, wondering where I had gone wrong. The next day I gathered all my courage and told David everything Diane had said in the kitchen. I didn't exaggerate, didn't embellish, just spoke the truth, my voice trembling but my eyes locked on his. And the first thing he said, after a long silence that felt like a sentence, was, "I think you misunderstood my mom." I nearly burst out laughing. But the laughter died in my throat, turning into a cold emptiness. Misunderstood? I repeated, barely believing what I was hearing. You think I made it up? Not made up, David shrugged, avoiding my gaze. It's just, my mom has a blunt way of speaking, she didn't mean it badly. I was stunned. She said I'd hold you back. How much more blunt can she get, David? Maybe, she's just worried, he said, this time even quieter. Worried that we're too different. You see it too, don't you? It felt like a punch to the gut. And in that moment I realized, David had started to believe everything his mother had planted in his head. From that day on, David was no longer David. He started coming home later. Big project at work, he said. But I knew his schedule well. There was no project. He was just avoiding the conversations, avoiding my eyes. Avoiding the truth. Dinner between us grew increasingly silent. He buried himself in his phone. I cut vegetables into tiny pieces, swallowing them like I was trying to swallow my disappointment. A week later, while I was folding the sample wedding dress to take for another fitting, because Diane said the first one lacked character, David suddenly stood at the door, arms crossed, his eyes uncertain. Can we talk? He asked. I set the dress down on the bed, heart pounding. Talk about what? He walked over and sat beside me. I've just been thinking. About our future. What do you mean? I gripped the edge of the dress. You know, Julia, we come from very different worlds. You're practical. And my family has other expectations. I turned to look at him, stunned. Are you saying you think I'm not right for you? No, not exactly, David said quickly. It's just, have you ever thought that maybe one day you'd feel out of place? At parties, at my family's gatherings, would you really be okay? I didn't know whether to get angry or cry. You're repeating your mother's words, word for word. He sighed, staring at the floor. We need some time to think, Julia. I just want to be sure. Sure about what? Whether I'm worthy of you? My voice shook, not out of weakness, but because I was holding back a rage that could have burned the room to ashes. David didn't respond. He just stood up and walked out of the room, leaving me sitting next to the wedding dress like some tragic joke. In the days that followed, I felt like I was living with a stranger. David no longer hugged me in the mornings, no longer asked what I wanted for dinner. Instead, he left notes. Coming home late. Don't wait up. The apartment that once felt warm like a nest now felt as cold as a temporary hostel. One time, I suggested we go for a walk in the park like we used to. He just glanced over and said, I'm tired. Not tonight. I asked, Are we even still a couple, David? He replied, I don't know. Those 4 words felt like a dagger straight to my heart. I walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and for the first time in months, I sobbed out loud. Not because of David, but because of myself. For loving a man who didn't have the courage to protect me from his own mother. That night, I looked in the mirror, eyes red, hair a mess, and asked myself, who is that woman in the mirror? And why is she begging for the love of a man who no longer wants to hold her hand? I once believed love could cross any boundary, could break through any prejudice. But it turns out, if I'm the only one fighting for it, then it's not love. It's just foolish sacrifice. David was no longer the man who proposed to me in a forest of pines. No longer the one who spent hours picking wedding invitation colors with me. He had disappeared. And in his place was a shadow, one swept up by a controlling mother's whispers and baseless pride. And I saw it more clearly than ever. I was engaged to a well-behaved boy, not a man ready to build a life with me. I couldn't take it anymore. After 3 weeks of being treated like a ghost in the home I once called my sanctuary, after 3 weeks of David avoiding my gaze with every excuse he could find, after 3 weeks of waiting for some miracle to happen, I hit my limit. That night was a Friday evening, light rain tapping against the kitchen window. David had just come home from some long meeting. No hug, no check-in. He set his bag on the chair and walked straight into the bedroom like I didn't exist. And that's when I knew. If I didn't speak now, I would lose myself completely. I stood in the kitchen, clutching the ring on my left hand, heart pounding like a war drum. We need to talk, I said, my voice colder than the sky outside. David stopped in the bedroom doorway, sighed, and nodded like he was bracing himself for a boring meeting. I didn't let him speak first. I can't take this anymore, David. Either you start acting like my fiancé or we end this right here. He looked up. His eyes were tired, but there was something unfamiliar in them. No longer the look of the man who once held me through a fever. It was the look of someone completely changed by someone else's whispers. What do you want, Julia? He asked, his voice hollow. You want me to cut ties with my mom? I nodded without hesitation. Yes, I want you to choose, either me or your mother. I can't marry a man whose mom treats me like garbage and who doesn't bother to do anything about it. David slowly walked to the dining table and leaned against a chair. He didn't look at me. Julia, my mom just wants what's best for me. She might be a little harsh, but she raised me. She's not a bad person. I laughed, a bitter, unfamiliar sound even to myself. Not a bad person, I repeated. She called me a burden. Said I'd drag you down. You didn't hear it because you didn't want to, and now you're telling me she just wants what's best? David said nothing. I slowly took the engagement ring off my finger. My heart was breaking into pieces, but I kept going because I knew. If I didn't do this now, I'd be stuck forever in a relationship where no one stood up for me. I placed the ring on the table, right in front of him. Choose, David, me or her. In that moment, the room fell into a chilling silence. Only the sound of rain outside the window grew louder. Then he looked up, eyes red, but with no resolve. I can't hurt my mom like that. I nodded. The pain in my chest was no longer a sharp blade. It was a slow-burning fire, consuming everything I once dreamed of. Thank you, I said, my voice trembling but firm. For giving me a clear answer. I left the table and walked into the bedroom. Within 45 minutes I had folded most of my clothes and essentials, packed everything into 2 suitcases. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just did what I had to do to get out of the mess that blind love had trapped me in. David stood at the door, not stepping in, not helping, not saying a word. As I pulled my suitcase toward the door, he whispered, "Are you really leaving?" I didn't look back. There's no reason to stay. I called an Uber and stood under the awning of the old apartment we used to call our first home, in the gentle rain that felt like someone else's tears, but not mine. I had no tears left. Angela opened the door to her apartment like she had been expecting this all along. Finally, she whispered, pulling me into a hug. You chose yourself. I just nodded. I didn't have the strength to answer. Angela lived in a 2-bedroom apartment near Cherry Creek North, and she had already prepared the guest room. With blankets, towels, and even a basket of homemade cookies she knew I liked. "This place isn't a hotel," she winked. "But it's the one place where no one will judge you." I smiled, for the first time in weeks. In those first few days, I was like a ghost. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, startled, forgetting that I no longer lived with David. I would touch my bare ring finger and feel the loss, like a hunger that never went away. But Angela was always there, handing me coffee in the morning, playing my favorite playlists, dragging me to the grocery store even when I didn't want to leave the house. Every little act was a thread pulling me back to solid ground. A week later, I opened my laptop again and started sending out rental applications. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew one thing. I had gotten out of a life where I was never truly valued. And that was the first step toward finding myself again. In the first few weeks after leaving the apartment I'd shared with David, I lived like a shadow, existing but not really present. Some mornings I'd wake up in Angela's guest room and have no idea what day it was. I'd pick up my phone just to put it down again. My closet was still full, but nothing in it felt worth wearing. I didn't eat, or ate without tasting. I avoided everything related to the wedding, even canceling the vendors we'd already placed deposits with. Angela, like a guardian angel in an old hoodie, never once asked, "When will you be okay again?" She just left a protein bar on the table each morning, pulled the curtains open to let in the sunlight, and occasionally dragged me out to Cheeseman Park for a walk, as if every step might bring my soul closer to the surface. One day, after seeing me sit in front of my laptop for hours without typing a single word, Angela sat beside me and handed me a color-printed flyer. "My friend works at that office building on Pearl Street. There's an available unit, good price, ground floor, close to your office. Want to go check it out?" I stared at the flyer, torn inside. Part of me wanted to say no. Too soon. Too sudden. But another part of me knew. If I didn't start over now, I'd stay stuck in this guest room, in the muddy memories I had yet to let go. 3 days later I signed the lease. A small one-bedroom apartment, with a kitchen just big enough to turn around in. But it was quiet, had sunlit windows, and, for the first time in years, it was a space I was free to call home. Angela and her boyfriend helped me set up the bed, pick out a couch from IKEA, and hang the painting I had bought at an art fair in Fort Collins. I arranged flowers in a small glass vase. Something that might seem meaningless, but it made me feel alive. I went back to work, at first just to fill the emptiness, but then I realized I was genuinely busy and useful. My boss, Rachel, noticed I was often the first to arrive and the last to leave. So she started giving me cross-departmental projects. Tasks I had never been entrusted with before. 2 months after I left David, I was invited to present a design concept for a statewide coffee shop expansion. The presentation went more smoothly than I had imagined. When the clients applauded, I almost cried. Not from pride, but because I realized I could still stand on my own. A few weeks later, Angela dragged me to a party hosted by one of her old college friends. I didn't want to go. Honestly, I was scared. Scared of questions. Scared of pitying looks. Scared of feeling like a failure after a broken engagement. But Angela gave me no choice. "Go, Julia. You're a human being, not a walking scar." I reluctantly agreed. And it was at that party that I met Matt. He was Angela's friend's cousin. Tall, slightly messy hair, wearing a denim shirt and sneakers so clean I actually noticed. Matt didn't ask what I did for a living or if I was seeing anyone. He asked what I thought about the honeycomb-shaped light fixture in the living room. I laughed. For real? The first time in months. After the party, he asked for my number. I was going to say no, but somehow, I nodded. We went for coffee the following Sunday, a little cafe in Washington Park with old leather chairs and soft jazz. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people, talking about books, movies, and whether eating lunch alone is really that scary. Matt worked in audio engineering and lived in a small rental apartment about 10 minutes walk from mine. His family was so normal it was almost comforting. No vacation homes, no snide comments, no judgmental stares. When I told him the abridged version of what happened with David, he didn't ask, "Why didn't you try harder?" He just quietly held my hand and said, "Sounds like you tried way too hard." Meanwhile, news about David started to trickle in through mutual friends. Diane didn't post anything on Facebook except pictures of flowers and fancy dinners, trying to create a perfect world, but I got the truth from Nick, David's older brother, who ran into me by chance at Whole Foods. "You doing okay?" Nick asked, hesitantly. "Getting there," I replied, eyes still on the salad bag in my hand. Nick sighed. "David, he's not doing well. Got fired last month. That project he bragged about to everyone collapsed. Missed the deadline, client pulled out, company laid off the whole team. He's back living with our parents, sleeps until noon, then watches old videos of you two. Mom's losing her mind." I swallowed hard. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. Or vindication. Just a strange emptiness. Like I was listening to a story about a stranger. Not someone who once sat beside me on the couch, promising to love me forever. I knew Melissa, David's ex, the one Diane used to praise, had come back after I left. But only for 3 weeks. She left too, leaving David with the doubt he had planted himself. I don't know what David's thinking now, and I don't need to. I have Matt. I have a job I love. I have a little apartment with a bookshelf slowly filling up. I have a life that no one else gets to define for me. I began to see it clearly. I was blooming after the wreckage. I never imagined Diane, the woman who once looked at me like I was a stain on her silk dress, would one day call me, her voice shaky, begging for help. But that's exactly what happened. The first message came on a Monday morning, an unknown number. I was about to delete it, but the first line froze my hand. "Julia, it's Diane. Would you have a moment to talk? I know I was wrong." I read it over and over. Not because I was touched, but because I couldn't believe the same woman who once said I wasn't wife material for her son was now backing down like this. I didn't reply. 3 days later there were 2 missed calls, then an email, then a Facebook message from a brand new account since I had blocked the old one long ago. Angela was sitting next to me at a cafe when she saw my screen light up. "Wicked witch again?" She raised an eyebrow, munching on a flaky croissant. I shook my head, sighing. This time she says, "David's not doing well, wants me to come back and help him through it." Angela nearly choked on her coffee. "What, are you his therapist now?" "No," I said with a dry laugh. "I'm the sedative, the source of strength. She just realized she kicked out." I didn't respond. But Diane didn't stop. 1 week later, while I was in a meeting at the office, the receptionist buzzed me. "Julia, there's a visitor here to see you. A middle-aged woman, says she's your—" I froze. Not out of surprise, but because I was shaking with anger. I walked down to the lobby, heart pounding. Diane was standing by the reception desk, clutching a large manila envelope, her face full of urgency. As soon as she saw me, she stepped forward. "Julia, I know you're busy, but I just need 5 minutes, please." I walked straight across the lobby and pulled her outside, under the curious stares of a few coworkers. Cold wind swept across the plaza in front of the building, but my face was burning. "What are you doing here?" I nearly growled. Diane opened the envelope and held out a resume. "It's David's file. He's trying to find a job." "Julia, you know your company is expanding. Could you maybe pass this to HR, just a referral?" I stared at her. Without blinking. "Do you understand how serious a boundary this is?" I said, every word heavy as stone. "You came to my workplace, uninvited, unannounced, just to hand in a resume for someone who treated me like dirt?" Diane started to cry. The tears did nothing to soften me. "Edie won't listen to anyone, Julia. He He's fallen apart since you left. He just lies there all day. No interviews, no cleaning his room. He needs a push, and I thought you were the only one he's ever listened to." I almost laughed out loud from rage. Listened? Listened? So he could leave me standing alone while his mother humiliated me? I was wrong, I know, but now you're the only one who can pull him out of that hole. I shook my head. No? I'm not a lifeline for someone who chose to drown me. You need to leave before I call security. Diane opened her mouth to say something, but I had already turned around and walked back into the lobby, leaving her. That night, Matt came over. When I told him what had happened, he placed his hand gently on my back without saying a word. Just a light pat. I leaned my head on his shoulder, and for the first time, I felt calm. Not because someone fixed the problem for me, but because someone was simply there. But Diane didn't stop. In the next 2 weeks, I received at least 8 missed calls, 5 emails, and a hand-delivered card to my home. No sender name, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Inside the card, it read, "David needs you. Please give him a chance. One call, just once." I didn't reply. Finally, on a Thursday evening, just after I finished work and was walking into the company parking lot, I saw her. A small figure, hunched beside a lamppost, like a wandering ghost who had lost her way home. I quickened my pace, unlocked my car door, but she ran up. "Wait, Julia, please." I turned around, this time not angry, just exhausted. "You need to understand something, Diane," I said, my voice calm to the point of being frightening. "You no longer have any place in my life. You and your son destroyed everything yourselves. And now, I have nothing left to give to either of you." "But," she choked, "he still loves you." I looked her straight in the eyes. "And I no longer love him. Do you know why? Because loving someone who won't protect you is self-destruction." I stepped into my car, slammed the door, and drove away. The rearview mirror showed Diane growing smaller in the darkness. I didn't know what she would try next, but I knew one thing more clearly than ever. I had walked out of that hell, and I wasn't going back, no matter how sweet it smelled, how many tears were shed, or how many promises were made. I thought after being rejected so directly in my office parking lot, Diane would finally understand, show some self-respect, and back off. But I had overestimated her ability to let go. Someone so used to controlling the world around her. 1 week later, on a Sunday evening, while Matt and I were sitting on the couch watching a documentary about modern architecture, something I quietly loved, there was a knock at the door. At first, I thought it was Angela, since she often stopped by unannounced. But then, Matt looked through the peephole and came back with a strange tension in his face. "It's David. And her." I stood up, my chest turning cold. "She came all the way here?" Matt nodded. "I can tell them to leave." I stood still for a few seconds, my breath heavy as lead. Then, I opened the door, without hesitation. David stood there, looking so worn down I barely recognized him. Sunken eyes, patchy stubble, wrinkled shirt, shoes soaked like he had been walking in the rain all day. Beside him, Diane didn't look much better, hair hastily pinned up, cracked lips, but still trying to maintain that polite smile. That same smile that used to send chills down my spine. "We need to talk," David began, his voice raspy like rotting wood. I didn't step back, but I didn't open the door any wider either. "Talk about what, so we can relive the past?" I'm sorry," David blurted out. "I know I was wrong. I should have stood by you from the start. I was weak. I listened to my mom because I was scared. But since you left, my life has fallen apart. I can't sleep, can't eat. I lost my job, lost everything. All that's left is emptiness." "And that's my fault?" I asked, voice steady as steel. "No, it's not. That's why I'm here. I want to make it right. I want to start over. I looked at him. Really looked. And the painful truth was, I didn't feel anything. No anger, no pity, just emptiness. As if the love I once had for him had long turned to dust, blown away by silent evenings, by all the times he defended his mother, and the way he stood by, while I was torn apart piece by piece and said nothing. Diane stepped in, eyes red like she had rehearsed this speech. Julia, I know I treated you terribly, but you have to understand, as a mother, you just want what's best for your son. What you call best, I cut in, was humiliating me in your kitchen, laughing when I talked about camping as a child instead of vacationing in the Hamptons, saying I would drag David down. Don't use motherhood to justify cruelty. She fell silent. I turned to David. I'm not someone who can fix you. I'm no longer a crutch for someone falling because of their own choices. I've been there. I reached out my hand, you pushed it away. Now you have to stand up on your own. David looked down. Diane raised her voice one last time. We were a family. No, families don't hurt each other like you did, I said as the door slowly closed between us. And real families don't make me choose between love and self-respect. I shut the door. No crying, no breakdown, just silence, clean and final. Matt looked at me, eyes warm, but he didn't interrupt. He held out his hand, and I took it. Are you okay now? He asked softly. I nodded, a faint smile blooming after months of hiding. I finally closed that door. 3 months later, I got promoted. The project I led was featured in Interiors Today magazine as a standout example of design that balances function and feeling. I framed the printed article and hung it above my home workspace, next to a photo of Matt and me at Lake Dillon, where we went kayaking under the early summer sunset. Angela threw a small party to celebrate my promotion. For the first time in years, I laughed so hard my cheeks hurt. And none of it felt fake. Matt moved in with me 1 month later. We didn't rush to label anything. We just lived side by side, sharing meals, music, and hugs at the end of long days. He didn't try to change me or expect me to fit into anything. He just was. Completely. And I, after all the pain I once thought would destroy me, had found the most valuable thing of all. Peace. Without condition. I no longer flinched at the sound of the doorbell. No longer checked missed calls every night. The memories of Diane and David now felt like an old movie. I once played the lead, but now I watched with distant indifference. I haven't fully forgiven, I haven't forgotten, but I no longer let them define me. I stepped out of the darkness. And this time, I didn't walk alone. Julia's story is proof that love alone isn't enough to build a lasting relationship. It takes respect, protection, and clear boundaries. When the one you love won't stand up for you, walking away isn't failure, it's courage in defense of your dignity. Julia chose herself, overcame the pain, rebuilt her life, and found true love in a place free of judgment. Sometimes, closing a door is the only way to open an entirely new life. What do you think about Julia's decision and the way she reclaimed her life? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional stories about family, healing, and finding yourself again.
I'm Eva. That morning, I arrived at the office early as usual, my mind still foggy from a dreamless sleep broken by an unshaped nightmare. But even the worst dreams felt gentler than the reality I was about to walk into. The 13th floor of the Crawford and Bell building always smelled like burnt coffee and cheap perfume. I stepped into the main conference room at 11:30 a.m., clutching a lunch tray for the data development team. 3 salads, 2 turkey sandwiches, and a non-fat latte I had specifically ordered to match my sister Madison's preferences. She was the executive director, here the board's golden child, and the same person who once looked me dead in the eye and said, "Nice job running deliveries, sis." The conference room gleamed with ceiling lights bouncing off the long glass table, making everyone look like contestants in a game show. Department heads in tailored suits laughed and chatted around the table while I weaved between them, trying not to spill anything from the tray. I placed the latte in front of Madison just as she was passionately laying out next quarter's growth strategy. She didn't look up, didn't thank me. No one in that room even acknowledged me. Not a nod, not a glance. I was just a shadow. Familiar, unnecessary. And then it happened. As I turned to leave, Madison abruptly stood up, latte in hand. She glided over to me like she was performing on a Broadway stage. "Diva," she said, voice so sugary it could rot teeth. "Remember what I told you last time about non-fat lattes?" I didn't even have time to respond before the scalding coffee hit my left thigh. It wasn't a slip, it wasn't an accident. I froze. The burning pain shot from my thigh down to my knee, my slacks soaked through, heat pressing in like I was suffocating. Madison gasped theatrically. "Oh my God, Eva, that was an accident. I hope you're okay. But hey, you're used to cleaning up messes, right?" The room erupted in laughter. That laugh, it wasn't loud, but it was sharp, clean like a razor. Some people covered their mouths, others turned away, but no one said a word in my defense. I stood there gripping the edge of the table, my jaw clenched so hard it numbed. No one offered a napkin, no one asked if I was hurt. They looked at me like I was a lunch break sideshow. I didn't say anything. I didn't cry. I didn't walk away. I just turned and looked Madison straight in the eyes. She raised an eyebrow, her lips curling in smug triumph. And then the conference room doors flew open. No one saw it coming. No one expected who walked in next. Dorian, my husband, stepped in wearing a charcoal gray suit tailored to perfection, his gaze as cold as ice. He didn't need to speak. With a single glance, all the laughter vanished. He walked to the center of the room, placed his briefcase on the table, and slowly scanned every face in the room, pausing on Madison for exactly 3 seconds. "I just reviewed the surveillance footage," he said, calm but sharp as a scalpel. "Everyone in this room who failed to intervene during that harassment, effective immediately. You're no longer employees of Dorson Capital." No one could breathe. I had never seen anyone go pale faster than Madison. A man in the corner gulped so loudly it echoed. A young woman gripped the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. "HR will send the official notices within the hour," Dorian continued, eyes still locked on Madison. "And if anyone wants to file a complaint, I'll make myself available for a court hearing." No one moved. No one said a word. Dorian turned to me. He didn't touch me, didn't ask if I was okay, but his eyes said everything. I walked out of the conference room, my clothes still damp and the scent of coffee rising in faint, warm wisps. The sting on my left thigh wasn't as sharp as the looks from those who had chosen silence. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Dorian had done his part, like a punctuation mark, but that was just the surface. The truth was, without that public act, this company would have kept pretending I never existed. And that's exactly what they had done for the past 3 years. I joined Nolan and Pierce right after earning my MBA from NYU. Unlike what most people assumed, I didn't use connections. I didn't lean on Dorian, even though by then he was already a successful investor. I wanted to prove myself. Not as someone's wife, not as Madison's little sister. I wanted to walk through that door on my own merit. And I did. In my first year, I proposed building a seasonal-based consumer behavior prediction model, merging retail data with sociological trends. No one paid attention at first, until finance noticed that the model had helped boost second quarter revenue by nearly 8%. I thought I'd finally be recognized. Then one Monday morning, I saw Madison's presentation slides on the executive room screen. Her name was at the bottom right corner. The model was mine. From its structure to the algorithm, every line of code still bore my signature markers. I stayed silent. Back then, I told myself, it's fine, as long as the company grows. A month later, she was featured in the internal newsletter as the creative mind behind Q2 strategy. Not a single mention of me, no credit line. I got a short email from the HR manager. "Thank you for your technical support." The next time I proposed launching a search trend analytics system using heat map data, Madison invited me to co-develop the project, then asked me to stay in the background for a more polished presentation. That's when I started to realize I was only allowed to shine in the dark. And everyone else? They didn't need much encouragement to follow along. I once saw a misforwarded internal email where the head of marketing, Alex Grant, joked, "Eva should switch to running the cafeteria. At least she'd be seen there." An intern named Molly, who I had mentored for 3 months, accidentally sent a Slack message. "Eva's the only person here whose role I still can't remember." The truth? They remembered. They just wanted me to believe I was nothing. One afternoon in March, I stepped into the elevator just as Madison and a few senior managers exited a meeting. They were chatting about an upcoming investor visit from Austin. As the doors began to close, Madison caught sight of me and casually said, loud enough for everyone, "Don't forget to refill the coffee, Eva. You missed the sugar last time." The whole elevator laughed. I stared straight at the floor, numbers without blinking. I had learned to stay quiet so well that they thought I'd given up fighting back. But what they didn't know was I saved everything. Every forwarded email, every original draft with timestamps, copies of every renamed slide deck. I stored them on a personal drive I named Aria, the name I once dreamed of giving a daughter, if I ever had one. It was a matter of survival, not revenge. I used to stay silent out of fear of being called a drama queen. In this place, if a woman stood her ground, she was labeled aggressive, too soft, and she was a burden. I'd been trapped between those extremes for 3 years. And Madison, my sister, the one who once read my 10th grade diary aloud to her friends as a joke, had evolved. She was more calculated now, more strategic, and had a whole corporation behind her. She didn't need to shout to take credit. All she had to do was walk up and smile in front of a camera. But I had changed too. I was no longer the girl in a blue cardigan hiding behind a presentation board. That morning, the wind was still, but the air in the first-floor lobby of Nolan and Pierce headquarters was tight enough to choke on. The reception staff wore new uniforms. The LED hallway lights were dimmed to a neutral hue, and the digital board slowly scrolled the words, "Welcome Mrs. Valerie Benton and the investors from Sterling Equity." Valerie Benton, my mother. Also a founding shareholder, and at 67, still moving every piece like a seasoned chess master. From charity galas to restructuring strategies, she always knew exactly where she stood and who she was pushing to the bottom. I stood about 3 steps away from the reception counter, holding a packet of documents I had prepared for the meeting. Madison had arrived early, seated comfortably in the VIP lounge, her hair neatly done, wearing a navy silk dress and pearl-colored heels, ones I knew for a fact Mom had picked for her. When Valerie walked in, she didn't glance around looking for me. The way she strode, confident, brisk, caused the younger staff near the pantry to leap up and greet her. I nodded slightly and said softly, "Hi, Mom." She gave me a quick side glance, no nod, no reply. Her look was like a fluorescent light, bright but cold, and completely devoid of warmth. When the investors from Sterling Equity arrived, she led them into the main hall. Each person received a company profile, one I had edited, rewritten, and polished line by line. But at the bottom, the name credited was solely Madison Benton, Chief Innovation Officer. I walked behind them, like an unnamed assistant. "Ladies and gentlemen," my mother said with poise and clarity, "let me introduce the person who led Nolan and Pierce through the post-COVID crisis, the mind behind all our technological transitions, my daughter, Madison Benton." Madison smiled, stepped forward, and shook hands with each investor. Polite applause followed. I stood next to the presentation screen, remote still in hand. No one turned toward me. No one asked, "Anyone else?" Valerie stood across the room, her eyes sweeping past me like I was a side table. Then she turned back to the audience, her voice dropping with deliberate weight. "This company is family, and in a family, we believe in those who create vision." The word create might as well have been bolded. I stepped back, slipping into the edge of the LED screen's shadow. As Madison delivered the speech fluently, I realized it was the exact draft I had written 2 days earlier. Only 3 sections had been altered. The rest, word for word, was mine. During the Q&A portion, an older investor, Mr. Harold Stanton, turned toward me, visibly puzzled. "And you are... Sorry, I don't see your name on the coordination list." I managed a calm smile. "I'm Eva Benton, head of the data modeling division." Valerie cut in immediately, her voice clipped and mechanical like a typewriter. "Eva supports behind the scenes. She's great with system operations. Madison handles the strategic direction." Support? That word again? I nodded, said nothing more. Speaking up now would seem disruptive, and I didn't need to because the air had already fractured long ago. At the end of the session, while the investors toured the office, I slipped away from the group. I needed a minute to breathe. I ducked into the data tech room, the coldest room on the floor, and leaned against a bookshelf, pressing down the cramp twisting in my stomach. On the desk lay a research funding contract with MIT, a deal I had spent nearly 4 months negotiating. I opened it to check the signatures. Madison, the CFO, not me. My name no longer existed on what I had created. I pulled out my phone, opened the ARIA folder, and snapped a picture of the document, not to threaten, but to remind myself I wasn't imagining it, that what was happening was real. When I returned to the hall, Madison was mingling with the crowd, holding a glass of white wine, laughing with Harold Stanton. Valerie stood beside her, beaming like she had just secured a Senate seat. I stood at the doorway, looking at the 3 of them, 2 people who brought me into this world and 1 who pushed me under it, and I thought, if this is family, why do I feel like the intruder? And in that moment, I knew one thing with certainty. I couldn't wait for someone to rescue me. I was going to rewrite my own place, line by line, with the same quiet they once mistook for weakness. I started with a black USB stick no bigger than a thumb, encrypted and never connected to any internal network. In my office, tucked between 2 rows of filing cabinets long forgotten by others, I set up a parallel storage system. Every evening, after my coworkers had left, I copied each original file, proprietary slides, experimental models, signed comparison charts, time stamps, final edits. I placed everything into a folder labeled 13A, an internal code tied to the first project ever stolen from me. Each piece of evidence was like a battery, small, but together, powerful enough to trigger an alarm. I also installed screen recording software on my office computer, configured so that every time a file bearing my name was modified by another IP, the system would automatically log it. In my email, I created a private label that forwarded every internal message related to my projects to a separate address under the name E. Rose. No one at Nolan and Pierce knew this address, except me and Dorian. Every action I took had a clear purpose. Not to retaliate, but to protect myself. I also began recording meetings where I was invited to observe, especially those where Madison presented strategies based on the models I had developed. During one virtual seminar with our Korean partners, I caught Madison responding to a question about the data structure. We built this entire framework from scratch with support from the tech department, but the concept was mine. She didn't even remember how to pronounce the name of the core algorithm. I didn't react. I simply saved the recording, clipped the relevant part, and labeled it stripped credit. About 3 weeks later, I received a LinkedIn message from Megan Riley, the strategy director at Whitestone Group, a tech firm specializing in healthcare data. "Eva, I heard about the seasonal location model you developed. Tremendous potential. Could we schedule a conversation? We're looking for someone to lead our regional market integration team." I read the message 3 times, not because I was surprised, but because it felt like a quiet hand on my shoulder I hadn't realized I needed so much. We met at a cafe in Westwood. Megan showed up with cropped silver hair and a warm voice. No pressure, no tactics. "We don't poach," she said. "We're looking for people who truly understand the problem." She showed me the job description, Director of Applied Analytics for the region. Full authority to build a new team, a starting budget of $1 million, no approval needed from any family board. I didn't give an answer right away, I just said thank you for seeing me. That night, I went home and opened the living room window that overlooked Century Bridge. The early June wind was dry and cold. I held a cup of tea, opened my laptop, and placed Megan's offer next to that day's backup packet. The 13 folder now contained more than 120 files. I typed a single line across the center of the email draft addressed to myself, with the subject, "If I disappear tomorrow, what will remain?" And I knew the answer, the truth. The second quarter strategy meeting was held in the 22nd floor conference room, reserved strictly for senior executives and strategic stakeholders. With a 60-seat capacity, an internal live stream system, and an LED screen large enough to make even sub-fonts legible. I wasn't officially invited, but I showed up anyway because I knew what was coming. The opening slide of Madison's presentation read, Project Lumen, Terrain-Based Weather Behavior Analytics, exclusive from the Strategic Innovation Department. Nearly laughed. Strategic innovation here meant Madison, and that project was the exact model I had built from raw satellite data 4 months ago. She stood center stage in a silver-gray suit, eloquently presenting a 6-month market research process, proprietary layered analysis, and proprietary interpolation algorithms, all language directly lifted from my original report. When she reached slide 9, the comparison between shopping behavior in Phoenix and Milwaukee, I raised my hand. Every gaze shifted toward me. Madison froze for half a second, then smiled. "Eva, you have a question?" I stood up, calm, clear. "Would you mind sharing with the room the last time you were directly involved in building this model?" The silence dropped like someone had hit mute across the entire space. Madison was still smiling, but the corner of her mouth twitched. "Ava, I think there's some confusion here. This was a team effort." I didn't back down. And who was on that team? Because the 3 input data sets, the regional consumption flowchart, and the classification algorithm all came from a system I built and personally verified. Some murmurs broke out around me. Someone whispered, "Lumen was Eva's, wasn't it?" At the far end of the table, Matthew Reed, the chief technology officer, arched an eyebrow. "Eva," he said slowly, "do you have documentation regarding intellectual property within our system?" I nodded. Yes, all original files, edit logs, email chains, and system logs were submitted to legal this morning. I've also sent a copy to an external IP attorney, formerly with Whitestone Group. Madison visibly froze. Under the table, I saw her grip the remote control tighter. Mr. Reed turned to Loretta Shaw, the head of legal, a black woman in her 60s whose voice never needed to rise to silence a room. "Loretta, can you confirm receipt of the file?" Loretta nodded and opened the folder in front of her. "Complete. Includes metadata, timestamps, and internal video. Sender, Eva Benton. Intellectual ownership established under the original creation clause." I didn't need to say more. I sat down. The room stirred. No longer whispers, but actual discussions. Jonah, a data analyst I had mentored, raised his head. "I can confirm Eva built the core. She taught me how to normalize the input streams." Someone from QA chimed in, "We received materials from Ava's account. We never worked with Madison during testing." I didn't look at Madison. I didn't have to. I knew that by now, her gaze was no longer piercing into me like a blade, but searching for an exit. The meeting ended 13 minutes early. An internal investigation was announced to begin within 3 days. By direct order of the CEO, who had silently attended the meeting via Zoom and hadn't looked away once. I closed my notebook and walked out while most were still stunned. From behind me, Mr. Reed called out, "Yeah." I turned. "You'd better brace yourself. These things are never simple, but this time, you've got the file and you've got people." I nodded. I know. Next Monday, no one could predict what would happen. But the atmosphere at Nolan and Pierce that morning was undeniably different. Like everyone could feel a shift coming, yet no one dared name it. Fresh flowers at reception. The coffee machine in the pantry polished until it gleamed. Mid-level execs wore suits sharper than usual, walking more quietly, eyes scanning calendars while pretending not to notice the private 10 o'clock meeting. Though everyone knew, it wasn't an ordinary internal check-in. I stepped into the central boardroom on the 18th floor, where executive strategy sessions usually took place. A silver USB was already plugged into the laptop connected to the main screen. I adjusted my sleeve cuff and took a deep breath. Madison walked in right behind me. She wore a crisp white suit, smiled gently, but her eyes were razor sharp. "Eva, you really should rest," she said lightly, placing her phone on the table. "Last week did more damage than you think." I didn't reply. The door swung open. 3 men in black suits entered, 2 in front, 1 behind. They offered no greetings, no pleasantries, yet the entire room shifted under their presence. The man in the back was Dorian. Not the casual Dorian we all knew, but the one people whispered about, but had never seen. CEO of Aldane Capital, silent orchestrator behind 72 subsidiary companies, once dubbed the quiet architect of West Coast market realignment. Madison visibly paled. "Dorian," she forced a steady voice, "what brings you here in person?" He didn't answer right away. He placed a thick folder in front of Loretta Shaw, our head of legal, then handed another to Matthew Reed. "I'm here as the new controlling stakeholder of Nolan and Pierce," he said clearly. "Aldane Capital has finalized acquisition of 32% equity through a trust vehicle. With it comes the right to restructure the executive board." The room froze. Madison opened her mouth to object, but Loretta spoke first. "We confirm this is fully legal. Aldane is now the primary voting authority." Dorian turned to Madison. "For the past 6 months, your decisions have led to serious internal grievances, violations of intellectual property protocol, and signs of discriminatory behavior, all documented. I'm not here for discussion. I'm here to act." He faced me. "Eva." I stood, walked forward, and activated the projector. The first clip appeared. Security camera footage showing Madison deliberately bumping into me with a latte during last week's meeting. The angle left no doubt. Deliberate steps, a quick glance around, a smirk 1 second before the spill. No one breathed. Madison was frozen. Next, leaked internal emails. V is just our diversity checkbox. Sent by a senior assistant with Madison on the CC line. Then, screenshots of presentation decks with metadata clearly crediting me as the original author, directly contradicting the versions bearing Madison's name. Lastly, audio of her on a call with a foreign partner, fumbling through a faulty explanation of an algorithm I wrote. I shut off the screen. The silence lingered. Dorian nodded. "By internal policy and our new governance authority, I hereby suspend Madison Benton from all roles at Nolan and Pierce. Her case will be reviewed by the Ethics and Legal Board." "You can't do this," Madison snapped, her voice cracking for the first time. "This company was my mother's. I built it." "Built it with what?" Dorian asked. "By erasing your sister? By stepping on people and covering it up with a rehearsed smile?" No one defended her, not a single voice. Valerie, my mother, appeared at the doorway. She didn't step inside, just stood and watched. Madison turned, desperate. "Wang." Valerie stayed silent, not a nod, not a word. She looked at me, long and steady, then turned and walked away. When the door shut behind her, I knew I'd never hear a "well done, sweetheart" from the woman who gave birth to me. But I also knew I didn't need it anymore. I unplugged the USB, returned to my seat, calm as if I'd never stood up. Dorian gathered the folders and handed them to Loretta. "Begin the review of all compromised IP from the past 3 years and issue a formal collaboration invite to Whitestone Group. Eva will lead the joint team." I looked at him. No need to say thank you. We had been through too much to waste time on simple words. Outside, the office hummed on like always. But on the 18th floor, something irreversible had just shifted. Not through force, through evidence, through truth. Madison left Nolan and Pierce on a rainy Friday afternoon. There was no farewell party, no goodbye email. She stepped into the elevator with a blank stare, one hand dragging a suitcase, the other clutching a beige handbag I once saw our mother pick out for her during a shopping trip in Manhattan. No one stood, no one looked back. The silence that day wasn't tense. It was a quiet relief, as if the entire building had just shed a thick layer of dust built up over the years. 3 days later, Madison's internal account was fully deactivated. Her name vanished from the org chart, and her auto-reply email held only 2 lines. No longer employed here. For inquiries, please contact the legal department. I sat in my new office, still on the 18th floor, but this time with my name etched clearly on the frosted glass, Eva Benton, Acting Director, Data and Analytics Ethics. I didn't choose the title CEO, Dorian offered, but I declined. I didn't need a title to clean up what had been bent out of shape. I just needed the power to set right what should have been right all along. The first thing I did was reinstate the internal credit policy. Every product, every project, every report from now on would require a formal recognition form, clearly listing the creator, the collaborators, and the reviewers. No more joint effort, no more behind-the-scenes support. I also launched an anonymous reporting system, allowing any employee to report ethical violations, from credit theft to verbal harassment, without fear of being traced or retaliated against. The data was encrypted, reviewed by an independent 3-person panel outside the executive team. Then I held a company WACI meeting. No PowerPoint, no spotlight. Just me standing in the main conference room, facing nearly 100 people, some of whom had known, ignored, or participated in silence. I'm not here for revenge, I said clearly. I'm here to begin again. But we won't rebuild by burying what happened. We will acknowledge it and learn from it. There was no applause, but no one left. They listened, truly listened, and stayed until the end. After the meeting, I found an envelope silently placed on my desk. No sender. Inside was a handwritten note. Thank you for not yelling at us, even though you had every right to. Not long after, I signed a contract with Whitestone Group, not just as a technical partner, but as a strategic ethics partner. They agreed to fund the Data Builders Scholarship Program, aimed at supporting women of color pursuing studies in data science and information engineering. 4 students were selected in the first round. I didn't ask for transcripts. I only requested 3 things in their applications: a personal story, their motivation to change the tech industry, and one time they felt overlooked but couldn't speak up. One afternoon in early July, I returned to the office from a meeting at the Research Institute and saw Valerie, my mother, standing outside the glass wall of my office. She wasn't dressed in her usual power suits, but in a knit coat, her face makeup-free, silver strands clearly showing at her temples. I opened the door and invited her in. She remained silent for a long moment, then said, "I read everything. Not to argue, just to understand." I didn't answer. She looked up at me, for the first time, without pride or judgment. I believed you needed to be corrected. Turns out I just didn't have the courage to accept that you didn't need anyone to draw your path for you. I poured her a cup of tea. No sugar, no milk. We didn't talk much, but the space between us was lighter than in any conversation before. When she left, she said only one thing: "Don't let anyone rewrite your name again." I nodded. In August, Nolan and Pierce officially released its internal ethics code, the first in the data analytics industry to include specific protections for whistleblowers and formal recognition of intellectual contributions. An article in Fast Tech Review called it "a quiet revolution led by someone who never raised her voice." I declined interviews. I didn't attend PR summits. I just worked. One evening, while I stayed late reviewing research forms, the maintenance worker came in. His name was Luis, the one who always quietly cleaned the 18th floor. He hesitated, then said, Eva, things are different now. No one's scared to take the wrong step anymore. I smiled. Thank you for letting me know that. When I locked up around 10 p.m., it had started to rain lightly. I stood under the awning, took a long breath, remembering the days I used to walk this hallway, coffee in hand, laptop weighing down my shoulder, unseen, unacknowledged. Now I walk the same corridor, standing tall, my shoulders weightless. They used to call me a shadow. I didn't need to scream to change that. I just needed to keep the truth intact until the day it spoke for itself. Eva's story is a powerful reminder that strength doesn't always come from noise. Some people don't fight with shouting, but with quiet resolve that never backs down. In real life, if you've ever been pushed aside or seen your name vanish from something you built, remember, silence isn't surrender. It might be the preparation for truth to rise clearly at the right time and in a way that can't be erased. What do you think about Eva's journey? Was she too quiet, or was that calm her greatest power? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more deep, real-life stories about family and resilience.
My name is Zoe, and it took me nearly 20 years to understand one simple yet brutal truth. In my own family, I was never the main character. Not because I didn't try. I tried everything, from being obedient and accomplished, to sacrificing everything. But I could never outshine the person they always favored. I thought I was simply being kind out of love, but the truth was, I had disappeared. And one day, when I looked back, I realized I had only been the quiet shadow of someone else. My younger sister. Chloe. You think I'm exaggerating? Then keep listening, because this story doesn't start with tears. It starts with a chocolate cookie I never got to finish. I was born and raised in a small town called Maple Hollow in the suburbs of Oregon. My mom was a night shift nurse at the Central Hospital, and my dad was a construction engineer who was often away on remote projects. From the outside, my family looked like any other ordinary American household. But live in it long enough, and you'd see that love in our home always tilted to one side. Chloe is 2 years younger than me. Since we were kids, she was called Mommy's Angel, Daddy's Baby. And me? I was the big sister who should know better, the mature one. Every time Chloe cried, I was the one who got scolded. Every time she didn't want to eat vegetables, I had to eat double. And whenever there was just one last slice of chocolate cake left, I was taught that she needs it more. I remember once, when I was 8 years old, I spent the whole afternoon drawing a picture for Mother's Day. I taped it to the fridge with excitement. That evening, Chloe came home with a paper flower she made in preschool. My mom saw it, teared up, and took down my drawing to replace it with the flower. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and told myself, it's okay, it's just the fridge. All through elementary school, I had to wake up early to help my mom make breakfast, while Chloe got to sleep in because she needs energy for her dance recital. I was a straight-A student for 5 years, but all I got was a rushed hug from Dad. Chloe! She'd sing one song at the school concert, and the whole family would show up with flowers, cameras, and Facebook posts. Mom would caption it, "Our family's pride and joy." I thought maybe things would change when we grew up. But I was wrong. High school made everything clearer. I studied like crazy to keep my scholarship, joined a math team, played softball, and worked part-time in the school library to pay for my textbooks. Chloe joined the cheer squad, skipped classes all the time, and no one said a word. Once, she got an F for turning in a project late. My mom called the teacher, argued for over 30 minutes, and Chloe got a second chance. I heard and just scoffed. It didn't stop there. Chloe would forget her assignments and ask me to do them. At first, I said no. But each time, my mom would sit me down and gently say, "Zoe, your sister has so much on her plate. You're better at this. Just help her a little." And so I found myself writing her entire biology presentation while she danced around in someone else's house, posting stories with her friends. That's how it went. I carried it all: house chores, tutoring, covering for Chloe's mistakes. Every time I voiced frustration, my mom would say just one thing. You're being selfish. Family is about loving one another. But I didn't feel any love, I just felt forced to love others by sacrificing myself. And my dad? He always stayed neutral, or rather, stayed out of everything. When I asked if he saw how unfair it was, he just shook his head. Don't make a fuss, Chloe's younger, you should be more understanding. Be understanding. That was the key word of my entire childhood. I had to be understanding when Chloe took the front seat. Understanding when I got blamed for something I didn't do. Understanding when Chloe got praised, and I was told, just try a little harder. And I believed it. I believed that's how love worked in a family. That if I just tried a little harder, they'd see me. Acknowledge me. But I was wrong. Much later I realized, some families don't lack love, they just choose who to give it to. And I wasn't on the list. I still remember the day of Chloe's high school graduation like it was yesterday. Our small town had never seen a backyard party that extravagant. Pink balloons lined the street, a white tent with red carpet stretched across the backyard, long tables covered in lace cloth, a full Italian buffet, Parmesan chicken, lasagna, bruschetta, a professional photo booth, flashing lights, props. A DJ came in from Portland and played all afternoon, and in the center of it all, Chloe, in a white dress, holding a mocktail, grinning like she'd just won an Emmy. I was 18 that year, wiping sweat off my forehead while carrying a tray of orange juice through the crowd. My dad had his arm around Chloe, shouting, "She makes us all proud," and my mom? Busy hugging neighbors, bragging that Chloe was heading to an Ivy League school. When in fact, she'd enrolled in the local. I stood by the buffet table, looking at the Italian spread, and suddenly thought of the night I got accepted to the University of Washington. When I handed the acceptance letter to my mom, she just said, "That's nice, sweetie," and turned back to her cooking show. No hugs, no tears, no calls to relatives. I thought, maybe when I graduate college, they'll finally be proud of me. But I was a fool. 4 years later, I graduated, with honors, a GPA of 3.87, working part-time to pay for my tuition. On graduation day, I didn't ask for a big party, just a family dinner, something small to mark the occasion. But that morning, the only thing I got was a text from my mom, "So proud of you, let's have a light dinner tonight." No one came to the ceremony. No flowers, no name banner in the stands, no trembling handwritten note from my parents. I walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, and took my graduation photo among strangers. While in the crowd, the only familiar face was my roommate Kylie, waving and yelling, "Zoe, you did it!" She and her mom had driven 3 hours to be there, because graduating college is a big deal. My family? They didn't show up. I went home with my diploma stuffed in a tote bag, feeling like a stone was lodged in my chest. The house was quiet, the kitchen lights dim. Chloe was lounging on the couch, scrolling through TikTok. My dad was watching basketball, the volume drowning out the sound of me opening the door. My mom walked out of the kitchen holding a box of Domino's pizza. "Happy graduation, sweetheart," she beamed, placing the box on the table. "Got your favorite? Extra cheese pepperoni." I froze. No cake, no flowers. Not even a card. Actually, Mom dug into the fridge, pulled out a bottle of Heinz ketchup, squirted "congrats" on a porcelain plate next to a slice of pizza. Then she added a lopsided heart underneath. "Gotta keep the celebration vibe," she grinned, proud like she'd just invented a gourmet marvel. I swallowed the lump in my throat, sat down, picked up the pizza like it was some lifetime achievement award. "Thanks," I whispered. Took a selfie with the slice and the crooked ketchup lettering behind it. I posted it with the caption, "Dream big, kids." No one looked at me. No one asked me about the day. No one even noticed my eyes had shifted from disappointed to numb. I ate 2 slices, went to my room and sat on the floor in the dark. My diploma was still rolled up in my backpack, untouched. I looked at the pizza photo, then scrolled through my album. Over 200 pictures of me helping Chloe prep for prom, teaching her makeup, driving her to practice. Photos of me? Mostly selfies. No one ever thought to take a photo of me unless I held the camera myself. That was the moment I knew. I was never the daughter of the party. I was the girl carrying drinks at someone else's celebration. That whole night, I didn't sleep. By morning I packed my things, pulled out the emergency credit card my grandma had given me, and booked a room at a small hotel downtown. I sent my mom a single message. I need a few days alone. There was no immediate reply. It wasn't until late afternoon that a message finally came. So when are you coming back? It's not a big deal. Why make a fuss? I didn't respond. Because to them, a box of pizza was enough. But to me it was the final drop that spilled the glass. I began to realize that if I kept waiting for them to acknowledge me, I would drown in oblivion. I sat at the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the cheap painting on the wall, a fake beach scene under a dull gray sky. The room was dead silent, with only the steady hum of the AC, like it was trying to lull me into a sleep I didn't want. I didn't cry. No screaming, no throwing things, no sad status on social media. I just sat there, with my diploma in my bag, and a stomach still churning from the cold slice of pizza. Everything inside me felt disturbingly empty. And in that silence I began to think. About everything. I thought about the time I helped Chloe move into her dorm room without anyone asking me to, just because Mom said, "You're her sister, you should be there." Thought about all the times I turned down invitations to hang out so I could babysit for my aunt, because Chloe was busy rehearsing for her big show. Thought about the texts I sent Mom, asking for a few $100s to buy books for my first semester, only to get a flat reply, "Money's tight right now, honey." I thought I had accepted the fact that my family lived by two sets of standards, one for Chloe, one for the rest of us. But that pizza box, or more precisely the attitude behind it, shattered something I didn't even know I'd been holding on to. A delusion. The delusion that if I were just good enough, smart enough, patient enough, they'd finally see me. That one day, they'd look at me the way they looked at Chloe when she walked off stage. But no. My life was just a silent understudy, a background role, no spotlight, no applause. I lay flat on the bed, staring at the ceiling as memories flooded in. I remembered when Chloe didn't make the cheer team and cried for a week. My mom rushed out to buy ice cream, and my dad called the PE teacher to have a word. And me? When I didn't make the cut for the state scholarship, all I got from my mom was, "It's okay, sweetie, you'll do better next time." I had lived my whole life believing I had to be the strong one, the reliable one, the one who never complained, the responsible one, the backup plan when Chloe failed, a spare tire in the family car. Always ready, but never allowed to drive. At 1 a.m, I opened my phone camera and scrolled through old photos. Dozens of me smiling next to Chloe, fixing her hair, holding signs cheering her on at school performances. But me? There wasn't a single photo someone else had taken. Unless I took it myself. I stared at the screen, a coldness crept in, not from the air conditioner, but from the stark truth. I had never been the first choice, I was just the fallback. The next morning, I didn't check my phone. I didn't go home either. I walked down to the lobby and ate the hotel's bland breakfast, soggy waffles, cold eggs, and watered-down coffee. But, at least no one told me I was overreacting. No one glared at me for not smiling. No one asked, "Where's Chloe?" I sat there for over an hour, watching people pass by without feeling rushed. It felt like I had just escaped a prison without locks. Because the thing that kept me trapped wasn't a cage, but blind loyalty. I thought, I'm not going back. Not just to the hotel, to the entire cycle. I wasn't going to be Chloe's cushion anymore. Not going to be the emergency ATM when Mom needed help with tuition. Not going to carry all the responsibility so they could call it silent sacrifice. No. That night, I opened my laptop and started a Word document titled, Plan to Leave. Step by step, line by line. Not to run away, but to reclaim my own life. I began searching for a temporary room across the city, where my best friend Amber lived. I sent an email requesting a short leave from the cafe where I worked part-time. Then I logged onto job boards, looking for work far away. New Mexico, Minnesota, even Maine. Anywhere far enough that emotions or debt couldn't pull me back. I logged into my bank account, the one I used to share access to with my mom since freshman year, and changed the password. Unlinked every card. Removed shared information from utilities. The next day, Mom called. 6 times. The texts were short and blunt. Zoe, come home. You're overreacting. It's just pizza. Don't be so sensitive. Chloe's tired too, you know. It's not just about you. I read every word. I didn't reply. I just stared at the messages, watching them peel back every layer I used to hide the truth. I was never the focus. Just the filler. That night, I stood at the hotel window, the freeway lights reflecting against the foggy glass. I held my phone and called Amber. "Are you okay?" she asked. "No," I answered honestly, "but I'm finally starting." I went back to the house on a Wednesday afternoon, not to reconcile, and definitely not because I missed it. I just needed to collect my things. A few books, my old printer, a couple of keepsakes I wasn't ready to leave behind. I timed it perfectly. When Chloe had her yoga class, and my parents usually did their early weekend grocery run. The house was eerily quiet, like an empty shell. I walked into my room. Everything was untouched. No one had moved a thing. No sticky note saying, "Where are you?" or "We miss you." It was as if I'd never vanished for 3 days. Never disappeared from my own family. I started packing, clothes, books, a few small mementos. When I opened my desk drawer, I found a stack of old papers. Utility bills, parent-teacher meeting letters, but one sheet made me freeze. A closure notice for an education trust account, with my name printed at the top. I didn't remember ever receiving it. I didn't even know such an account existed. My heart pounded. I sat on the bed, hands trembling as I flipped to the next page. The account had been created when I was 9 by my grandmother, my dad's mom, as a college future fund. By the time I turned 18, it had over $38,000. But then came the bolded line. Account closed on August 16, 3 years ago. Reason: full transfer of remaining funds to a new account under the name Chloe Dawson. It felt like someone had slapped me across the face. I tore through the drawer, searching for more. Tucked inside a thick folder, wedged between old books, I found a bank statement. It wasn't just a transfer. They had used that money to open a small business development account under Chloe's name. Attached were spending invoices, purchases for jewelry supplies, domain registration for a website. I picked up the first printout. The title read, Chloe's Sparkle. Handcrafted jewelry, with love. I laughed, a dry, hollow sound that chilled me to the bone. While I had been juggling 3 jobs to pay tuition, living off instant noodles in a dorm room, turning down an unpaid internship in New York because I couldn't afford to survive there, Chloe was using my college fund to buy colored stones, leather cords, and take live streaming classes to sell bracelets. I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel shocked. What I felt was a kind of clarity, so sharp, it ached. I photographed every document, quietly returned them to their place, locked the drawer, pulled the spare key taped to the bottom, where my mom used to hide it when I was little, and kept it in my pocket. Then I stood up, taking nothing with me but the digital copies, and a bitterness that had never been so clear. On the way back to the hotel, I opened Chloe's Instagram. Her page was glowing with pictures of flowers, bracelets, necklaces, and unboxing shots of orders. The most recent post showed Chloe at her desk, captioned, Starting a business is never easy, but thanks to my family's support, I never gave up. Family? That's me. I was the one who helped her write her branding presentation. I was the one who fixed her typos in the product descriptions. I even ordered a bracelet just to support my little sister. And now, I realized I was wearing the very dream that had been stolen from me around my neck. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't watch TV. I sat by the window, watching the dim yellow streetlight reflect onto the road, feeling so empty, I didn't even know how to name the feeling anymore. How had I not seen it? How could I have been so naive? To think, they simply forgot the party. That I was just overreacting because of a pizza. The truth was, the party wasn't thrown for me because I wasn't worth celebrating anymore. They had made their choice, they chose Chloe, not just in the little things, but in everything. They placed their bets, their faith, and their money, all on her. I was the backup plan. The one who endured, supported, stayed silent, but not anymore. I opened my laptop and created a new folder titled Cutting Ties Plan. Inside I saved all the document photos, created a PDF, organized what I needed. Because I knew this wasn't about waiting to be loved anymore. This was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. Chloe's 21st birthday was coming up, and just like every other year, my family was buzzing in rehearsed celebration mode for the special day of their little Princess Dawson. I received just one message from Mom. "Hope you're feeling better. Chloe asked if you're coming." I stared at the words, feeling the blood in my veins turn cold. No apology. No mention of the diploma, the stolen money, the pizza box. Just an invitation, as if nothing had happened. No, I wasn't going. And this time they would know the reason. In a way that couldn't be denied or brushed aside. I reopened the Cutting Ties Plan folder. It took me 3 hours to organize every document in clear order. Bank statements, transfer contracts, college fund closure documents, screenshots of Chloe's business account summary, and even the old email I had sent Mom asking for help with tuition. Along with her blunt reply, "There's no money, honey, I'm struggling too." And I created a new email, recipients, Dad, Mom, Chloe. But I didn't stop there. I added the names of everyone who had defended them when I started pulling away. Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, Uncle Fred, Dad's cousin, and even Grandma June, who always said, "Zoe's just overly sensitive." Subject line: "Why I'm not coming to Chloe's birthday." I wrote it coldly, precisely, without a single unnecessary emotional word. To my family. I once believed the problem was me. That I wasn't good enough, kind enough, or trying hard enough to be treated fairly. But now, I understand. The truth was never about me. It was about choices. And this family chose Chloe a long time ago. You took my college fund, a fund created when I was in elementary school, and used it to help Chloe launch her Etsy bracelet business. While I scraped by, worked part-time, and lived on instant noodles, Chloe was invested in using the very future meant for me. Mom said there was no money for my books, while transferring $12,800 into Chloe's account in just 3 months. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done being silent. All the evidence is attached to this email. I'm not skipping the birthday out of spite, I'm rejecting the role you've forced on me for 22 years. This is not just declining a party. It's rejecting the backup role you assigned me my entire life. Zoe Dawson. Access to all shared accounts, finances, and responsibilities terminated as of May 18th. I hit send. Just one click, but I felt like I had severed the chain that had bound me throughout my youth. I didn't check for responses right away. I set my laptop aside, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat waiting. No panic, no fear. Just a quiet calm after the storm. 11 minutes later my phone buzzed. Missed calls. Mom. 6 times. Then came the texts. "Zoe, you misunderstood. You're digging too deep into this. Every family has to adjust plans sometimes. Chloe didn't know anything. Don't ruin her day. I read them all, then quietly locked my screen. No reply. An hour later, Chloe posted an Instagram story. Some people just can't stand seeing others happy. They choose to be victims to hide their jealousy. Truly sad. The picture showed a party table, crystal glasses, yellow roses, tiered cake. But I didn't focus on the image. I read the comments. Cousin Marcy. Chloe, I thought your birthday was next month. Uncle Fred, just read the email. That's heavy. Aunt Linda, wish I'd known sooner. Zoe didn't deserve that. Even a private message from Grandma June appeared. You weren't overly sensitive. You endured far too much. I'm sorry I didn't see it earlier. I didn't expect to be defended, but each message felt like the first breath I'd taken in months after being held underwater. That night, I slept deeper than I had in years. No dreams, no waking in the middle of the night, just a clean, uninterrupted sleep. Like my mind had finally taken out the trash. I didn't post anything online, no status updates. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. They could deny it, play the roles of the grieving mother, the hurt little sister, the confused father who didn't know what was going on. But the numbers, the signatures, the transfers? Those don't lie. I didn't need to justify anything anymore. I had told the truth. And the truth was, I was no longer Chloe's shadow. I was Zoe. I had just stepped out of the silent role they had written for me for 22 years. I left Maple Hollow on a foggy morning with 3 suitcases, a laptop, and a vow never to look back. No tears, no goodbyes, no one chasing after me, except the quiet reflection of myself in the hotel mirror as I closed the door. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't text Chloe. I didn't send a thank you email or a keep in touch message. I left Amber's temporary room with a note of gratitude, then headed north, where just a week earlier, I had received an official job offer from a media company opening a new branch in Seattle. I wasn't hoping for a perfect new beginning, but I needed distance, far enough that no thread, not even blood, could pull me back. My first job was as a content assistant at Willow Media, a mid-size company specializing in digital content and brand campaigns. The office was on the 6th floor of an old red brick building, with wide windows overlooking Puget Sound, and a meeting room with a coffee machine so good, I once secretly dumped my instant coffee just to have an excuse to arrive early. No one here knew me as Chloe's sister. No one cared what my dad did, or how many parties my mom had thrown. They only saw me as Zoe. The woman with a clean record, a strong work ethic, and a habit of turning in deadlines a day early. I rented a small apartment in Queen Anne, 3rd floor, old wooden floors and windows that opened to maple trees turning red. Every evening I lay on the sofa, listened to distant trains passing, read old books, or doodled on the white walls with colored pencils. Things I'd never dared to do before. Afraid of making a mess. A month after I moved in, I met Elijah. He was the lead designer on the marketing team, 2 years older than me, with a crooked smile and a habit of wearing bright yellow Crocs even during client presentations. I noticed him at the first meeting, not because of how he looked, but because of how he listened. He never interrupted, never spoke over anyone. He just nodded and asked one thoughtful question that made everyone rethink their stance. We started with short lunches in the office kitchen, then bike rides home after work. One day, when everyone was discussing family relationships, he looked at me silently and asked, "Zoe, have you ever felt like the extra in your own home?" I froze. Not have, Elijah, I was, for 22 years. We didn't call it love at first. We called each other anchors. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't a shadow, a replacement, the understanding one. I was just Zoe. And that was enough. Little by little, I cut the last ties with Maple Hollow. Bank account? Fully separated. Utilities? My name removed from the bills. Social media? I hid every post tied to family, leaving only 3 photos: my graduation, my first sunset in Seattle, and a picture of me and Elijah beneath a red maple tree. Chloe kept posting party photos, new jewelry launches, captions like, "Grateful for my ever-supportive family." But it didn't sting anymore. I just felt peace. Once, Aunt Linda, my mom's younger sister, texted me. "I read your whole email. At first I was shocked, but looking back now, I think you did the right thing." Then another message. "If you ever need anything, I'm always here." I didn't need anything. But those words warmed me more than 100 "where are you" texts from my mother ever could. My job progressed slowly but steadily. After 3 months, I was assigned to lead a new campaign for a young adult book brand. During the kickoff meeting, Elijah looked at me and said, "This project's perfect for you. You tell stories in a way people want to hear." And for the first time, I believed it. Not because someone labeled me. Not because I was trying to prove something. But because I felt it in everything I did. I called my grandmother. The only person in our extended family who never forgot my birthday, even at 83 and in late-stage diabetes. When she heard my voice, she cried, "Are you okay, Zoe?" "I'm living, Grandma, really living." "Are you happy?" I smiled, glancing at Elijah asleep on the couch with a book resting on his chest. "I don't need applause anymore, Grandma, but I still feel like I'm on stage." She laughed, then whispered, "That's enough then." I received Chloe's wedding invitation on a rainy Tuesday morning. The envelope was thick, embossed paper, gold-trimmed edges, elegant cursive script, like something from a royal affair. "You are cordially invited, Zoe Dawson, to the wedding of Chloe Dawson and Austin Wells. Saturday, October 14th, at Maple Hollow Country Club." No personal note, no handwritten line, no "sis," no "we miss you," no "hope you'll come." Just 2 printed check boxes. Accept with joy. Decline with regret. I stared at the blank square for a long time. In that moment, what hit me wasn't nostalgia or sadness, but a dry, bitter laugh echoing in my head. I didn't know what made them think I'd come back. After everything they did, after every silence I had to swallow, after the invisible wall they built, how could they think that a pretty invitation could pull me home? I didn't check either box. I folded the invitation and slipped it into a drawer with other things that no longer held meaning. Old business cards, utility bills, a faded family photo from 10 years ago, where I was smiling awkwardly between 2 people who had never truly seen me. I wasn't planning to respond. And I wasn't planning to stay home alone that day either. Because I already had plans. 3 weeks ago I called my grandmother. She was the only person in the family who had ever asked me, "What do you really want?" instead of, "What should you do for others?" "Grandma," I said, "I want you to come visit me in Seattle." "Oh, Zoe, I'm old, and with this diabetes, flying is exhausting. You just have to sit next to me on a park bench, that's enough." And she said yes. Even with her weak legs, even needing assistance to fly, she came. Because unlike the others, she chose me. On October 14th, while all of Maple Hollow was wrapped in white dresses, crystal decorations, and wedding music, I walked hand in hand with my grandmother along the Seattle waterfront. We ate crispy waffles by the pier, watched the ferries pass, and burst out laughing when a seagull almost dove for the sandwich in her hand. "You know," I said, "right about now, everyone's probably raising glasses to Chloe's happiness. And you," she replied, looking at me, "are living the life you chose. I'm proud of you." We took a photo by the old clock tower downtown. She held a hot cocoa, I had a latte, both of us wearing long coats and colorful knitted scarves Elijah had given us. I posted the photo with just one caption: "Choose the family that shows up, not the one that just sends invitations." The photo only got a handful of likes. But one familiar name showed up in the list: Marissa Langley, Chloe's college classmate, who had visited our house twice and then disappeared. No comment, no explanation, just one click. And I understood. Some people do see the truth. They just need time. The next day I received a message from Aunt Linda. I didn't go to the wedding. I couldn't stand how it was all staged like a perfect show. I wish I had been as strong as you back then. I read it and sighed. Not out of sadness, but because for the first time someone stood on my side. Not because they were exposed, but because they chose to see. That night, Elijah wrapped his arms around me and softly said, "You know, not everyone born under the same roof is your real family." "I know," I replied, resting my head against his chest. But for the first time, I believe it. It wasn't that Chloe's wedding didn't matter. It just didn't matter to me. Because I wasn't looking for a seat at a table that was never set for me anymore. I had found my place, on a park bench, with my grandmother beside me, a hot cocoa in hand, and a smile that didn't need to be posed for a camera. That winter, I woke up to the first snowfall in Seattle. The sky was silver gray, silent like a blank page waiting to be written on. I poured a cup of coffee, stood by the apartment window, and watched the first flakes gently fall on the rooftop. The first notification I got that morning was from Instagram. Chloe Dawson posted a new story. I didn't open it right away. I brewed another cup, made my bed, read a few pages, then picked up my phone. Not with curiosity, but with the calm detachment of an outsider. It was a video from Chloe's baby gender reveal party. Balloons, lights, a backyard decorated like a wedding magazine shoot. Chloe in a white dress, her belly already rounded, stood between my parents, Dad holding a blue confetti cannon, Mom hugging a teddy bear. All three laughed and screamed, "It's a boy!" I didn't feel a thing. No anger, no sadness, no bitterness. Just a clean emptiness. Like watching a trailer for a movie I had no interest in seeing. A year ago I might have cried. Out of hurt, feeling left behind, feeling like they had once again created a perfect family without me. But now? I just long pressed the screen, hit mute, and kept scrolling. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't bitter. I just understood that they were no longer family, in the way I once defined it. I used to think I needed recognition. That if they came back, said sorry, admitted they were wrong, I would forgive them. But no. Forgiveness doesn't come from outside. It comes when you stop waiting. And I had stopped. I went to work like usual. Elijah still drove me to the office each morning in his old beat-up car that he refused to replace because, as long as it runs, it's still my buddy. On the way, we played indie music and talked about work, mixed with discussions about which plants we should grow on the balcony come spring. A normal life. Not glamorous, not flashy, but real. Every moment of it. On the weekend, I video called my grandmother. She sat wrapped in a quilt, holding a cup of tea, telling me about the new nursing home manager. Always scowling, but with a soft heart, I laughed. The sound echoing through my small apartment, and I realized I had never felt this light. One night, while Elijah was dozing off on the couch with his laptop on his lap, I sat alone in the kitchen and opened the old folder named Dawson Family on my computer. I didn't read everything, just skimmed. The PDFs that once made my hands shake, the tear-streaked emails, the evidence I once thought I needed to win back justice. They now felt like keepsakes. Not weapons anymore, but reminders that I had survived. I closed the folder. I didn't delete it. But I renamed it, The Past. The following January, Elijah and I flew to Colorado to go skiing with friends. One evening around a campfire, someone asked me, "Do you still talk to your family?" I just smiled. "No, but I'm okay." They nodded. Didn't ask again. And I knew that answer needed no explanation. I once thought my life was a journey to find a place in someone else's heart, but in the end I found something more important. A solid place within my own. And that is freedom. No one can take that from me. Zoe's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes peace doesn't come from others' forgiveness, but from choosing to stop waiting for them to change. She walked away from a family that loved conditionally and built a life that's honest, where she is seen, respected, and simply allowed to be herself. Freedom isn't rebellion. It's when you're no longer bound by the expectations of those who never truly knew you. And sometimes the biggest turning point is letting go. What do you think of Zoe's journey? Have you ever felt forgotten in your own family? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel to explore more heartfelt stories about family, choice, and growth.